Chapter 1747 Heaven, Earth, Black and Yellow. Chapter 1747, Heaven, Earth, Black and Yellow. In Su Zimo's heart, Dao was almost an invincible existence. But now Dao said it personally. Given her cultivation, she could only dominate less than 50% of the upper world. Even before ascension, the vastness and mysteriousness of the upper world had already given Su Zimo a huge blow. Dao said, "Right now you are invincible and unmatched on this mainland. However, if you ascend to the upper world, you are almost at the lowest level." Su Zimo nodded. Senior Human Emperor once told me that there are countless paragons and monster incarnates in the upper world. All those who can ascend are the top experts of the lower worlds. It's not just those who ascended from the lower worlds. Dao said, in the upper world there are many paragons who are born there. From the moment they are born, they are already at a higher level than the beings of the lower worlds. Suddenly, Su Zimo recalled something and asked, "What's the cultivation of the 7 witches who descended from the upper world earlier on?" "They're just a few black witches." Dao shook her head gently. Black witches are considered as the lowest level living beings in the witch world of the upper world. However, even the lowest level living beings of the upper world can suppress me with ease. Su Zimo smiled bitterly and shook his head. The supreme divine power I comprehended can't even defend against the lesser divine powers of the black witches. Dao pondered for a while and said, "There's no harm in telling you some things now. In the upper world, the first thing you have to experience is the 3 major realms." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he listened intently. He did not want to miss out on any information about the upper world. After all, the more one knew, the higher the chance of gaining a foothold after ascending to the upper world. Furthermore, at his current cultivation realm, he knew nothing about his future. Dao said, "The 3 major realms are the Black Essence, Earth Essence and Heavenly Essence realms. In the witch race, those at the Black Essence realm are called Black Witches. The immortal cultivators of the Black Essence realm are called Black Immortals and so on. Of course, the civilizations of the Trichiliocosm are different. Although their titles might be different, there's not much changes to their corresponding cultivation realms." Su Zimo nodded and asked, "Why are the 3 major cultivation realms called the Black, Earth and Heavenly Essence? Is there any significance behind them?" Dao did not reply. Instead she asked, "Black, Earth and Heaven. According to this order, can you think of anything?" Black, Earth, Heaven? Pondering for a moment, Su Zimo's eyes lit up and he blurted, "Heaven, Earth, Black and Yellow?" "That's right." Dao nodded. "I got it." Su Zimo said, "Heaven, Earth, Black and Yellow. Actually, yellow corresponds to the Emperor's one of the billion minor Kiliocosms." Dao nodded slightly with a hint of admiration in her eyes. As for the essence, in Black, Earth and Heavenly Essence they represent the origin of the power of the upper world, Heaven and Earth Essence Chi. The Heaven and Earth Essence Chi is similar to the Spirit Chi in the minor Kiliocosms. However, it's countless times stronger. Earlier on, you said that a lesser divine power of the Black Witch destroyed your supreme divine power. That's because his lesser divine power was infused with Heaven and Earth Essence Chi. No wonder. Su Zimo came to a realization and lamented, to think that fusing with Heaven and Earth Essence Chi would cause divine powers to transform to such an extent. Dao said, the so-called divine power method was passed down from the upper world. The true power of divine powers can only be released when it is fused with the Heaven and Earth Essence Chi. After pondering for a moment, Su Zimo asked again, "Does that mean that if I can master Heaven and Earth Essence Chi, I can release divine powers at will?" "Of course not." Dao shook her head. Typically, cultivators of the Black Essence realm can only release lesser divine powers. Those of the Earth Essence realm can only release greater divine powers. Only those of the Heavenly Essence realm can release supreme divine powers. Firstly, the Heaven and Earth Essence Chi required to release greater or supreme divine powers is immense and can't be activated unless one's cultivation realm is high enough. Secondly, if one's cultivation realm is not high enough, their body and essence spirit won't be able to withstand the burden of releasing greater and supreme divine powers. Su Zimo memorized everything in his mind and tried his best to comprehend it. Dao said, "Your vision has to be broader and more far-sighted. In the upper world, there are not only divine powers, but also countless treasures and secret skills, many of which I have never seen before. The upper world not only has peerless divine powers, but also a few taboo mystic classics. If you can obtain any of them, it'll be enough for you to use for the rest of your life. Peerless divine powers. The first time he heard those words was from the storyteller. However, the storyteller had once said that it was only a legend and he had never seen them before either. Now he knew from Dao that peerless divine powers did exist. Furthermore, they were in the upper world. However, even heavenly essence experts could only release supreme divine powers. What sort of power did one have to possess to release peerless divine powers? As though she could read Su Zimo's mind, Dao said, "There are naturally higher levels after the heavenly essence realm. However, you are still far from that. There are 9 levels to every major realm of black earth and heavenly essence. There's a huge difference between each level, and the difference between the 3 essence realms is even greater." Su Zimo asked, "Miss Dai, is your cultivation realm above the heavenly essence realm?" "Of course." Dai nodded. "The human emperor you mentioned is also above the heavenly essence realm." Su Zimo sighed internally. Initially, he thought that he would be able to catch up to Dai soon after ascending to the upper world. To think that there was such a huge gap between him and Dai. The conversation between the two of them was isolated by Dai's secret skill and no one could hear it. Dai's gaze landed on the green lotus true body. After looking at it for a while, she said, "It's rare that it has grown to the peak of grade 8. "That's right. It's a pity that I haven't been able to break through to grade 9. Su Zimo said. The green lotus true body had been at the peak of grade 8 for some time now. Even after comprehending 3 supreme divine powers, the green lotus true body could not break through the barrier of grade 8 and seemed to have reached a bottleneck. The creation green lotus is the only one in the world. I don't know how it grows either. Dai said, however, a grade 9 creation green lotus is not the limit. The true peak is at grade 12. Furthermore, the later 4 grades of the creation green lotus will produce even greater opportunities. The potential of this clone is definitely not weaker than your dragon phoenix body. In fact, it might even surpass the dragon phoenix. Dai had an extremely high evaluation of the green lotus true body. Su Zimo had countless things he wanted to say to Dai. However, right then, Dai suddenly looked up at the crack in the firmaments and said softly, "It's here." The moment she said that, a repressing aura surged into Tianhuang mainland through the crack. Splash! A green river floated in the firmaments, emitting a rich evil aura. Every single drop of water in the river contained an extremely terrifying power that was enough to kill any emperor of Tianhuang mainland. Chapter 1748 9 Neonate Curse. Chapter 1748, 9 Neonate Curse. The green river crossed the firmaments and 4 figures appeared faintly in the river, emitting a powerful aura that overwhelmed the world. Su Zimo reared his head and looked up. Given his cultivation realm, there was naturally no way he could detect the cultivation realms of those figures. However, he could sense that the 4 figures were clearly much stronger than the 7 witches of the upper world. I've got to see who was the one who dared injured people from our witch world in this small lower world. A voice rumbled from the green river with a tremendous might that was sinister. The 4 experts of the witch world that descended were only faintly visible in the green river. Although they did not reveal themselves, their spirit consciousnesses scanned Tianhuang mainland brazenly. Damn it! The witch race here has been annihilated. Before long, the 4 experts of the witch world discovered the gigantic blood-colored palm print in the witch race's ancestral ground. A few ghastly green gazes burst forth from the green river in the firmaments and looked at Dai and Su Zimo who were standing on the blood-colored palm print. The light of the eyes seemed to arrive instantly. Dai took light steps and shielded Su Zimo behind her. She was indifferent and motionless. Before the green beams of light landed on Dai, they had already dissipated into nothingness. Oh! A surprised voice sounded from the green river. Woman, you're quite capable. Another voice sounded and asked coldly, who are you? Which part of the upper world are you from? Dai raised her head slightly and said indifferently, you're just a few earth witches. You're not worthy of knowing my background. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. According to Dai, the earth witches should be experts of the earth essence realm. Compared to the 7 witches of the upper world, they were indeed a major cultivation realm higher. How dare you? An earth witch hollered, stop being pretentious. No matter how strong you are right now, you're merely a phenomenon in the lower world. The earth witch was indeed sharp and saw through Dai's facade right away. Dai said, even a single phenomenon is enough to deal with you guys. The moment she said that, Dai struck directly. Her fair palm seemed to have passed through the endless void and arrived at the green river at the end of the firmament, patting gently. You must have a death wish. When the 4 earth witches saw that, they channeled their essence spirits and the green river created raging tides that devoured Dai Yu's palm. The green river was condensed from the essence energy in their bodies and contained an extremely strong corrosive power mixed with evil curses. Even divine weapons of the upper world could not defend against the power of the green river, let alone flesh and blood. How pretentious! Get the hell down! Dai Yu scolded softly. Her palm shone with divine lights and slapped the green river. The filth and stickiness of the green river did not taint Dai Yu's palm at all. Boom! There was a loud bang. The entire green river that crossed the firmament seemed to have frozen instantly and was motionless. Thereafter, it let out a loud bang and was shattered by Dai Yu's palm. The green river turned into dark green rain that descended from the skies and almost enveloped Tianhuang mainland. In the skies of Penglai Island, an emperor of the Golden Crow race was initially in his true form and stood on the clouds. To think that the dark green rain would descend from the skies. A drop of rain landed on him. Just a single drop. Poof. The drop of rain corroded a bloody hole in his body. Immediately after, the terrifying power contained by the rain devoured his Golden Crow body in the blink of an eye. The essence spirit of the Golden Crow Emperor had just escaped when it was pierced by another drop of rain and died on the spot. The expressions of the emperors of the human race, Long Ran and the others changed starkly when they saw that. Most of the power of the Green River had dissipated after it was shattered by Dai Yu. However, the remnant power that turned into rainwater was still so terrifying. Even emperors could not defend against it. Which living being in Tianhuang mainland could survive the downpour? Dai Yu had a calm expression. She rubbed her jade-like fingers gently and a small flame appeared on her fingertips. The flame flickered on Dai Yu's fingertip, as if it could be extinguished by a gust of wind. However, after the flame appeared, the dark green rain was burned before it even descended on Tianhuang mainland, turning into the richest spirit qi and fusing into Tianhuang mainland. As for the 4 earth witches, they were already revealed by Dai Yu's palm and looked wretched. Kill? The 4 of them shouted and attacked one after another. An earth witch slapped his storage bag and summoned a dark green skull that was as huge as a mountain. The skull opened its mouth as though it wanted to devour the world. Thick, dark green essence qi surged out from the eye sockets and mouth of the skull continuously with torrential flames that blanketed the skies. 9 Neonate Curse. Another earth which channeled his essence spirit and released a greater divine power. Even living beings of Tianhuang mainland had not seen the 9 Neonate Curse before. The 9 Neonate Curse was extremely vicious. In order to cultivate that greater divine power, one had to use a secret skill as well as a living infant as tribute. For a full 49 days, he had to refine it using secret skills continuously and maintain the infant's life force to ensure that the infant did not die. Eventually the infant would die in pain. The infant's soul would be filled with endless resentment and would be captured by the witch race to cultivate that greater divine power. The moment the greater divine power was formed, 9 resentful infants appeared in midair with tragic expressions and cried. The 9 resentful infants charged towards Dai Yu in different directions. The 3rd earth witch waved his bone staff and drew a semicircle in front of him. In the semicircle, many crooked incantations appeared and enveloped Dai Yu like dark green spirit snakes. The 4th earth witch's bone staff paused on the ground. Immediately after, dark green flowers appeared beneath Dai Yu's feet one after another. Like the palms of evil spirits, they grabbed towards Dai Yu's ankles. The 4 earth witches attacked at the same time without holding back. Many experts of Tianhuang mainland were not involved. However, they could still sense the terrifying power released by the earth witch experts. Be it the skull or the divine powers and secret skills, each of them was enough to sweep through Tianhuang mainland and kill all living beings. Dai Yu's expression was unchanged and her eyes were calm. Suddenly, she raised her foot and stomped gently. Boom. The void beneath her feet shattered like a gigantic ancient mirror and dense cracks appeared on it. The dark green flowers that had just grown were crushed by Dai Yu's stomp. How dare you descend to the lower world with such capabilities? Before Dai Yu's words were finished, the ground beneath the feet of the earth witch who summoned the dark green flower earlier on suddenly split open and a gigantic spike burst forth. The spike pierced the earth witch's body. The earth witch died on the spot. Chapter 1749, Peerless Magnificence. Chapter 1749, Peerless Magnificence. Thereafter, Dao waved her wide sleeves and attacked the descending incantations of the witch race. Boom. There was a loud bang. The incantations dissipated instantly. Dao's sleeves were scarlet as blood. After dispelling the incantations, her strength did not diminish and she collided heavily against the Earth Witch. Bang. The body of the Earth Witch was torn apart by the seemingly weak sleeves and his essence spirit was destroyed, dying on the spot. Dao's gaze shifted as she looked at the gigantic skull in the firmaments. She did not extend her hand. She opened her mouth slightly and let out a white stream of qi. Qi. The white qi was like a long sword that burst forth with an extremely sharp edge. It defied gravity and entered the gigantic skull. Qi sword. Suzimo was shocked. Such methods were nothing special in the cultivation world and were extremely ordinary. Anyone with strong lungs and terrifying breathing could do that. However, the sword that was condensed from a single qi stream defied gravity and soared into the skies to fight against the weapons of the Earth Witch experts of the upper world. That was completely beyond Suzimo's understanding. Boom, boom, boom. The mountain-sized skull began to collapse and countless bone shards fell from midair. The Earth Witch's weapon was sliced into pieces by Dao's qi sword. Suddenly, the Earth Witch behind the skull tilted his head and his eyes dimmed. He fell from midair and there were no longer any signs of life in his body. Dead. Dao's qi sword had not only destroyed his weapon, it even killed him on the spot. In the blink of an eye, only one of the 4 Earth Witches was left. Suzimo was shielded by Dao and none of the divine powers and secret skills released by the 4 Earth Witches even made contact with him. The living beings of the 10,000 races raised their heads and looked at everything with dumbfounded expressions. Although the blood-robed expert was a woman, she was incomparably domineering and looked down on the world, suppressing all the experts of the upper world with an almost invincible stance. Even the emperors of Tianhuang mainland were completely convinced, let alone the other living beings. The blood-robed woman was like an empress that looked down on the world with disdain. Domineering, aggressive and invincible. Long Ran grinned. Back then, although I saw her at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, I never expected her to be so terrifying. The storyteller's palm trembled slightly as well. He took out an ancient book from his storage bag as though he wanted to record something. However, after a long time he could not write a single word and could only sigh. The eternal human emperor can be recorded and described using words. However, no words can describe a fraction of this senior's magnificence. Previously, as the storyteller of Enigma Palace, he would record every major event in Tianhuang mainland. However, at that moment the storyteller could not write a single word. Above the firmaments, the 9 resentful infants had tragic expressions and let out ear-piercing cries. Their green eyes widened as they lunged towards Dao. Dao did not move at all and had no intention of attacking. She stood there with a calm expression. When the 9 resentful infants arrived before Dao, the ferocity on their faces vanished and turned into fear as though they were shocked. There was naturally no way the 9 resentful infants knew Dao. However, they were the most sensitive and sensed an extremely terrifying aura from Dao. There was no longer hatred in the eyes of the 9 resentful infants. Instead, there was a pleading look. In fact, the 9 infants clasped their hands and bowed to Dao repeatedly. While it looked clumsy, they were in fact extremely pitiful. Although they were condensed from divine powers, they could sense that the blood-robed woman before them could truly free them. Disperse. Dao spoke softly. The colors of the 9 infants began to change, turning from dark green to pink and healthy. A look of relief flashed through the eyes of the 9 infants. Before long, the 9 infants dissipated into the world. Dao did not even have to attack. A single word was all that was required to dispel that greater divine power. Not only that, Dao even severed the origin of the greater divine power completely this time round. The Earth Witch would never be able to condense that divine power again. The Earth Witch's face was livid with fear. He also realized that the blood-robed woman before him was not someone he could defend against. In a flash, he turned and fled towards the crack in the firmaments. You've cultivated such a vicious divine power and karma has befallen you. Today will be your death anniversary. Dao said. She stretched out her hand and clenched it gently through the void. Before the Earth Witch could escape into the crack, he turned into a blood mist and died on the spot. The 4 experts of the witch world that descended were all dead. Dao waved her hand and put away the storage bags of the 7 black witches and 4 earth witches. with a slight exertion of strength, the storage bags shattered in her palm and the contents were revealed. She handed them to Su Zimo without even looking at them. Take these things. Under normal circumstances, although the witches of the upper world were dead, their spirit consciousness imprints were still on their storage bags. Given Su Zimo's strength, there was no way he could open them. When Dai Yu thought about that, she did not even bother to remove the spirit consciousness imprints and shattered the storage bags completely. What's all this? Su Zimo received it with a confused expression. There were many things in the storage bags of the witches of the upper world: elixirs, weapons, materials, and everything else. However, Su Zimo did not recognize most of them. In fact, he had never even seen many of the materials before. Dai Yu took a casual glance and said, "These witches are very poor and have nothing good. Most of these things belong to the witch race and are not of much use to you. Keep those few bottles of elixirs safe." She pointed to a few bottles among them. These are essence condensation elixirs. In the upper world, when cultivators of the black essence realm cultivate, these are the most commonly consumed elixirs. Not only does the essence condensation elixir contain heaven and earth essence chi, it can also help cultivators absorb heaven and earth essence chi better. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he asked, "If I consume the essence condensation elixir to cultivate now, can I control the heaven and earth essence chi?" "Of course not." Dai Yu shook her head. "You have not gone through the tribulation transcendence yet. Only after doing that can your flesh and essence spirit attempt to absorb heaven and earth essence chi. Although you're a dragon phoenix now, if you consume this essence condensation pill, you won't be able to withstand the power of the elixir and will explode on the spot." Su Zimo was secretly speechless. Even the most ordinary elixir in the upper world possessed such terrifying power. Chapter 1750 One-Eyed Living Being. Chapter 1750 One-Eyed Living Being. Dai Yu took another look and pointed to 7 stones the size of an infant's fist. These are essence spirit stones and they contain rich heaven and earth essence chi. They are also important cultivation resources and are even more precious than those essence condensation elixirs. Given my current cultivation, I'm still unable to absorb the heaven and earth essence chi within, right? Su Zimo asked. Dai Yu shook her head gently. Even if you complete your tribulation transcendence and ascend to become a cultivator of the black essence realm, you won't be able to absorb the heaven and earth essence chi within, let alone your current cultivation realm. This essence spirit stone is something that can only be absorbed by earth essence realm cultivators. Only black essence realm cultivators who have cultivated the few taboo mystic classics of the upper world will be able to absorb the heaven and earth essence chi within. Taboo mystic classics. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He had heard Dai Yu mention that term earlier on and his eyes flashed with curiosity. The taboo mystic classics are ranked alongside a few supreme divine powers. These are too far away from you and it's useless to tell you about them now, Dai Yu did not continue. Su Zimo nodded and did not ask further. He carefully placed the few bottles of essence condensation elixirs and 7 essence spirit stones in a separate storage bag and put them away. Just as Dai Yu was about to speak, she frowned and looked up. Boom. Boom. There was a loud bang. Suddenly, a gigantic foot descended from the crack in the firmaments. Its thick thigh was like a heavenly piercing divine pillar. The gigantic foot carried an apocalyptic aura and formed a humongous shadow. It descended from the skies and stomped heavily on the East Sea. Instantly, a massive tsunami surged in all directions from the East Sea. Right away, countless living beings in the East Sea were trampled to death by that stomp. The living beings of the 10,000 races were shocked. The bottomless East Sea created massive waves. However, the massive waves that were dozens of feet tall did not even reach the living beings' ankles. The experts of Tianhuang mainland looked up with pale expressions. Even with their vision, they could not see the end to catch sight of the living being's full appearance. To be precise, a single thigh from that living being was already enough to penetrate the entire Tianhuang mainland. It's not over yet. Dai Yu's expression gradually turned cold. She waved her sleeves and flung it towards the thigh that connected heaven and earth. His scarlet sleeves seemed to have transformed into a blood-colored saber that slashed across the thigh. Poof! That heavenly piercing thigh was sliced into 2 by Dai Yu's sleeves. Fresh blood gushed out and dyed the East Sea red. The lower half of the thigh fell heavily into the East Sea, creating blood waves. Roar! A pained and furious roar sounded from the firmaments. Boom! Immediately after, a gigantic palm descended from the firmaments, covering the skies as it grabbed towards Dao. The gigantic palm seemed to envelop the entire middle continent of Tianhuang mainland. The living beings of the 10,000 races were shocked. They had never seen such a massive living being before. A palm covered the skies and enveloped the middle continent. A single foot was enough to fill the East Sea. Most importantly, up till now, the living beings of the 10,000 races had yet to see the full appearance of this living being and did not know what it was. Dao's expression was unchanged. She looked at the palm that was reaching for her and punched in reverse. Compared to the gigantic palm that covered the sky, her fist was like a speck of dust. However, that punch shattered the palm into pieces. Roar! Roar! The roars in the firmaments intensified. The consecutive heavy injuries had already caused the living being to enter a berserk state. Suddenly, the skies darkened. A large shadow descended slowly, and in the middle of it, a gigantic eyeball appeared. It was ferocious and carried endless rage and killing intent. The living beings of the 10,000 races had never seen such a gigantic eye. That eye was comparable to the stars in the firmaments and was filled with a powerful might. An image flashed through the minds of the living beings of the 10,000 races. A living being that resembled a gigantic god stepped into Tianhuang mainland and reached out with one hand. After being severely injured, it bent down to check things out. That shadow was the face of that living being. The living being had no nose, ears or mouth, there was only a gigantic single eye. Umph. Dao snorted and raised her hand, pointing at the single eye in the firmaments. The jade-like finger tore through the air like a sharp sword and entered the single eye. That single eye was blinded by Dao's finger. Ah! The living being howled tragically and its voice grew further and further away. It had clearly escaped from Tianhuang mainland. Suddenly, a gigantic ancient bell descended from the crack in the firmaments. The surface of the ancient bell was filled with runes that were antiquated and mysterious, emitting a powerful aura with a terrifying might. Even the single-eyed living being earlier on could not match the aura released by the ancient bell. Dao waved her sleeves and whipped the ancient bell fiercely. Clang! When her sleeves whipped the ancient bell, it rang loudly. Cracks appeared densely in the firmaments of Tianhuang mainland from the bell. Instead of retreating, the ancient bell enveloped Dao's head, as though it wanted to fight her. Dao's eyes shone brightly. She reached out and slapped the ancient bell. Dong! The ancient bell shuddered and let out a loud ring. Immediately after, the runes on the ancient bell burst forth and shone with a resplendent divine light that enveloped Dao's palm. From the looks of it, the ancient bell wanted to fight Dao in dermic arts. Poof! 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 The runes collided with Dao's palm and shattered one after another. They could not defend against her power at all. Boom! In a flash, Dao's palm shattered many runes and slapped the ancient bell heavily. Zimo could clearly see that there was a huge dent on the ancient bell with Dao's palm print deeply imprinted on it. Buzz! Buzz! As though it was sentient, the ancient bell let out a series of sorrowful cries. Suddenly, an extremely massive power burst forth from the ancient bell. It illuminated, forming rays of light. The surface of the ancient bell shone brightly. The sunken palm print on the ancient bell was gradually recovering. You're trying to test the waters with a sentient immortal weapon without the guts to reveal your true body? Seems like you don't want this immortal weapon anymore. Dao's expression was cold. She leaped up and left Zimo's side, rushing towards the ancient bell. Up till this point of the battle, this was the first time Dao had left Zimo's side. It was clear that she was prepared to use her full strength to retain the ancient bell. As though it sensed danger, the ancient bell did not dare to linger and transformed into a streak of light, escaping towards the crack in the firmaments. Dao was about to give chase when her expression changed slightly. Chapter 1751, White-Robed Man. Chapter 1751, White-Robed Man. Suddenly, a figure descended from the crack in the firmaments. The person's black hair fell and he wore a white shirt. He looked handsome and his eyes were like stars. With his hands behind his back, he looked like an immortal. It seemed to be a human. This was a human of the upper world. Emma? Standing in midair, the white-robed man swept his gaze across Tianhuang mainland and murmured, "This minor kiliacosm is not bad. The 10,000 races coexist. There's even a divine Ho? MMM? Suddenly, his gaze landed on the dragon phoenix true body. He sniffed and his eyes lit up. The aura of a dragon phoenix. Ha 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 ha. The white-robed man laughed. Not bad, not bad. I can capture this divine Ho and dragon phoenix as my immortal pets. However, I still have to look for the creation green lotus first. Where is it? The white-robed man surveyed his surroundings. In a few breaths, his gaze landed on the Kunlun ruins and the green lotus true body. Su Zimo felt his body turn cold and his hair stood on end. So, it's hidden here. The white-robed man clicked his tongue in wonder. To think that it would fuse so well with flesh. How rare. Under the gaze of the white-robed man, Su Zimo felt as though he was seen through from head to toe, as though there were no secrets to speak of. Su Zimo was secretly alarmed. Be it the witch race, the one-eyed living being or the ancient bell, none of the experts from the upper world could find the green lotus true body. However, this white-robed man could find him right away. Although he did not know the cultivation realm of the white-robed man, the latter was definitely more terrifying than all the previous experts of the upper world. The white-robed man's gaze landed on Yen Qi and his eyes lit up. Not bad, this woman from the god race is not bad. Her looks and figure are all top grade. I can take her back. Swoosh. In a flash, the white-robed man descended above the Kunlun ruins. He looked at Su Zimo. I'm refining an immortal pill and lack the creation green lotus. After refining you, I'll definitely succeed in creating the immortal pill. It's your honor to die as my pill refinement material. The white-robed man said proudly and reached out to grab Su Zimo. Suddenly, a blood-colored figure flashed before Su Zimo. You must have a death wish. A cold glint flashed through the white-robed man's eyes as an extremely terrifying power burst forth from his palm towards Dao. Dao's expression was unchanged. She merely flipped her palm casually. Bang. The two of them exchanged blows and collided with a loud bang. The white-robed man shuddered and his expression changed slightly. Su Zimo was secretly alarmed as well. Up till this point of the battle, this white-robed man was the only one who could defend against Dao's attack without being injured. Not only that, the white-robed man did not even retreat half a step. Su Zimo could not help but feel worried. However, Dao's expression was calm and her eyes were still unmoved. She merely looked at the white-robed man coldly. Who are you? The white-robed man narrowed his eyes and asked sternly. Scram? Dao did not say anything more. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Dao was decisive to kill. Normally, she would not waste her breath on the white-robed man nor would she let him leave. But now, she seemed to have reservations. Could this white-robed man be so strong that he could threaten Dao? You're merely a bloodline phenomenon. How strong can you be? The white-robed man smirked and saw through Dao's facade instantly. Dao said indifferently, you are merely a clone as well. That's the difference. The white-robed man said proudly, this clone of mine has its own essence spirit. It was formed after I cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years. It's not something that your bloodline phenomenon can compare to. I'm definitely going to get my hands on the creation green lotus in this minor kiliacosm. The white-robed man said coldly, I'll kill whoever stands in my way today. Even if your true body dares to descend, I'll kill you as well. Before his sentence was finished, a blinding light appeared on the white-robed man's glabella. Ugh. Su Zimo, Yen Qi and the others could not help but grunt when they felt an immense pressure against the ball of light. The light was even more dazzling than the blazing sun in the firmaments and possessed an incomparably terrifying might. This clone actually managed to cultivate to such a realm. Dao narrowed her eyes slightly. It's too late for regrets now. The white-robed man hollered and the light on his glabella released an extremely terrifying power that surged into his hands. The terrifying power rapidly formed a gigantic sword in the white-robed man's palm. Although that sword was not a true weapon, it was countless times stronger than the ancient bell earlier on. Slay. Raising his sword, the white-robed man slashed towards Dao. You want to kill me? Dao's gaze turned cold. Seems like you don't know who I am. Before her sentence was finished, Dao's figure suddenly disappeared. A blood-colored butterfly the size of 10 feet appeared in midair. 2 full moons were imprinted on the wings of the blood-colored butterfly and it glared at the white-robed man coldly like a pair of eyes. Su Zimo held his breath and focused. Prior to this, Dao had never transformed into her true form. With just casual attacks she suppressed all the experts of the upper world. But now, Dai Yu had reverted to her true form against the white-robed man. Fu. The white-robed man sneered, "Of the butterfly race, only the golden butterfly sovereigns are strong. You're just a red butterfly." As though he thought of something, the white-robed man could not continue. "Why you?" Blood drained from the white-robed man's face as his eyes widened in fear. His arm trembled slightly as he pointed at Dai Yu and said with a quivering voice, "Why you're that blood butterfly from the great wilderness." The moment he said that, the white-robed man turned to flee without hesitation. Dai Yu's wings flapped. That tremble was almost negligible. However, the white-robed man's body suddenly spasmed violently and gigantic cracks appeared on the sword that he had just conjured. Crack, crack, crack. Boom. There was a loud bang. The bedazzling sword shattered. The white-robed man spat out blood with a shocked expression and wanted to continue escaping. However, Dai Yu's wings trembled again. That single tremble seemed to create a terrifying and apocalyptic storm that descended on the white-robed man instantly. The white-robed man's flesh fell off continuously in the storm and fresh blood splattered everywhere. He let out a series of tragic cries. "Blood butterfly. Empress. Please spare." In the storm, the white-robed man's voice sounded intermittently, as though he was begging for mercy. Chapter 1752 Dao Fruit. Chapter 1752, Dao Fruit. The white-robed man begged for mercy but Dai Yu was indifferent and ignored him. Since she had already attacked and incurred a huge feud, she would not let him leave. Dai Yu reverted to her human form and with light steps, entered the terrifying storm. The storm was tearing at the white-robed man's flesh wildly. In a few breaths, the white-robed man was turned into a skeleton by the storm. However, there was still a powerful life force within the white-robed man's body that struggled against the surrounding storm. Su Zimo focused his gaze. Through the layers of storms, one could vaguely see a bedazzling light the size of a goose egg within the white-robed man's skull. Even in the terrifying storm, the ball of light did not extinguish and was filled with divine lights that were injected into the white-robed man's bones to maintain his life force. If not for that, the white-robed man would have been torn into pieces by the storm. Dai Yu leaped into the storm and extended her palm, landing on the head of the white-robed man. She exerted strength in her palm and her jade-white fingers pierced into the white-robed man's skull. Crack. Accompanied by a jarring sound, Dai Yu reached out and removed the top of the white-robed man's head. Ah! The white-robed man let out another tragic cry. Dai Yu turned a deaf ear to him. With a calm expression, she reached into the white-robed man's head with her fair palm and took out the dazzling ball of light. "Why you destroyed my cultivation?" The white-robed man could not finish his sentence. It was as though the white-robed man's source of power was severed the moment Dai Yu took out that dazzling ball of light. In the blink of an eye, his body and bones were destroyed by the violent storm and shattered. Dai Yu waved her sleeves gently and the storm dispersed. The world returned to normal once more, as though everything that happened earlier was just an illusion. Dai Yu took off the storage bag of the white-robed man and shattered it. A large number of items scattered out of the storage bag. There were elixirs, cultivation techniques, weapons and everything else. There were many times more compared to the Black and Earth witches earlier on. Although Su Zimo did not recognize any of them, he could tell that the items in the white-robed man's storage bag were clearly much better. More importantly, there were 10,000 of the essence spirit stones that Dai Yu had mentioned earlier. At that moment, Su Zimo did not know how precious the essence spirit stones were in the upper world. Essence spirit stones were not only cultivation resources in the upper world, they were also a form of currency circulated in the upper world. In the upper world, black immortals were unable to absorb the essence chi of the essence spirit stones and had almost no essence spirit stones. Even among the earth immortals, 10,000 essence spirit stones was a considerable sum. This time round, without waiting for Dai Yu's guidance, Su Zimo put away all the essence spirit stones in a storage bag for safekeeping. Dai Yu's palm held the bedazzling ball of light. She exerted strength in her palm and the ball of light dimmed before long. In the blink of an eye, there was only a round jade the size of a goose egg left in her palm. It looked extremely ordinary. There were even a few faint patterns on the jade. Dai Yu came before Su Zimo and handed him the jade stone that was the size of a goose egg. She said indifferently, "This is that person's Dao fruit. It contains his Dao techniques." Su Zimo was about to receive it when his heart skipped a beat when he heard that. He suddenly thought of the martial Dao prime body. The martial Dao prime body was formed from the martial Dao fruit. However, the process of forming the martial Dao fruit was extremely special. That was because he created the martial Dao and obtained the augmentation of a vow. He condensed the profoundness and will of the martial Dao, fusing it with the faith of all living beings before condensing a martial Dao fruit. The Dao fruit in Dai Yu's palm was clearly different from his martial Dao fruit. Dai Yu thought that Su Zimo was worried about something and said, "I have already sealed the power of this Dao fruit. It is of no threat to you." Of course, given your current cultivation, you're far from reaching that level. You can put it away for the time being. Once you reach a certain cultivation realm, this Dao fruit might be useful to you. Although Dai Yu said it casually, Su Zimo could still tell that the value of the Dao fruit was much greater than any essence spirit stone. "Miss Dai, please keep this Dao fruit." Su Zimo replied. "What use do I have for it?" Dai Yu curled her lips and shook her head. "Although this thing is precious, it is not worthy of my attention. It's something I'll just throw away casually." With that said, Dai Yu threw it casually. Su Zimo caught it hurriedly and placed it on a separate storage bag. "What's his cultivation realm in the upper world?" He could not help but ask. "His true body should be similar to the human emperor you mentioned." Dai Yu replied indifferently. Pausing for a moment, she continued, "He is someone from the heavenly world. Given his cultivation, he definitely has a high status in the heavenly world and can rule over an entire area. It wasn't easy for his clone to cultivate to this realm and form a Dao fruit. Now that I destroyed his clone, I've incurred a huge feud with him. Naturally, he won't dare to take revenge on me. However, if you ascend to the heavenly world, you'll have to be careful. Of course, if you ascend to the great wilderness, you won't have to worry about him. I'll naturally ensure your safety." Suddenly, Su Zimo recalled something. When Dai Yu saw that person, she did not attack immediately. Instead, she told him to get lost. Unfortunately, the white-robed man did not recognize Dai Yu's background and wanted to kill her. In the end, he ended up in such a state. At that time, Su Zimo thought that this person had a powerful background and even Dai Yu was wary of him. Now he finally understood that Dai Yu was worried about him. At the same time, Su Zimo felt emotional. Initially, he thought that his Green Lotus and Dragon Phoenix true bodies were already unprecedented monster incarnates. To think that the white-robed man had a clone as well that was similar to his two true bodies. In fact, the white-robed man's clone was even stronger and more terrifying. Thankfully, he still had the martial Dao prime body. Even Dai Yu did not notice the martial Dao prime body. Su Zimo still had countless questions he wanted to ask and endless words to confide in her. However, Dai Yu shook her head at the moment. "Let's wait a while." She looked at the crack in the firmaments. "If this crack is not repaired, more living beings of the upper world will come down. My phenomenon is about to disperse. I'd better repair the crack first." With that said, Dai Yu leaped up and flew towards the firmament. It was only now that Su Zimo realized that Dai Yu's figure seemed to have become more illusory after the battle. She was not as corporeal as before. Right now, the Dai Yu before him was merely formed by his bloodline phenomenon and could not even be considered as a clone. The continuous battles took a huge toll on the bloodline phenomenon. Chapter 1753 Mending the Heavens. Chapter 1753 Mending the Heavens. Right in front of the living beings of the 10,000 races, Dai Yu stood in the firmaments. With a wave of her hands, streams of divine light spilled onto the crack. As though it was pulled by an invisible force, the crack closed slowly like a miracle. Dai Yu mended the crack in the heavens. That scene was extremely shocking. The storyteller, Long Ran and the emperors of the human race revealed deep admiration as they bowed down towards the blood-colored figure in the firmaments. Everyone knew that if the crack was still present, the living beings of Tianhuang mainland could meet with misfortune at any moment. Dai Yu's action was equivalent to saving the entire Tianhuang mainland. As long as the heaven and earth were fixed perfectly and the laws were complete, it would be way too difficult for anyone from the upper world to descend. First, someone from the lower world had to release a secret skill to summon them. Now that the witch race was destroyed, apart from the storyteller, no one else knew this secret skill. Second, even if someone summoned them, those of the upper world would require an extremely powerful cultivation to descend. At the very least, they had to be comparable to the eternal human emperor. More importantly, even when the eternal human emperor descended, he suffered an immense backlash and his body collapsed. his essence spirit was severely injured and his cultivation realm fell. Up till now, he had yet to re-establish a connection with the human emperor's palace. Who would be like the eternal human emperor who was willing to make such a huge sacrifice to save the masses of Tianhuang mainland? There was only a single eternal human emperor. The entire mending process lasted for a long time and consumed a lot of Dai Yu's energy. Su Zimo could clearly see Dai Yu's figure dimming and turning increasingly illusory, as though she could dissipate and vanish from Tianhuang mainland at any moment. He was silent and looked at the blood-colored figure fixedly. Unconsciously, he was already clenching his fists nervously. He still had many things he wanted to tell Dai Yu. He was worried that Dai Yu would leave without bidding him farewell. After a long time, the crack in the firmaments finally closed completely without any gaps. Heaven and earth were complete and the laws were perfected. Tianhuang mainland had returned to normal. The living beings of the 10,000 races shouted with delighted expressions. The scene of the experts of the upper world descending earlier on had a huge impact on them. It was like a nightmare that they did not dare to recall until now. Nobody wanted Tianhuang mainland to endure another calamity as such. Su Zimo did not laugh. Although Dai Yu was still around, her figure had become extremely blurry and could dissipate at any moment. She walked towards Su Zimo. However, she had barely taken a few steps when her figure swayed and she almost broke down. Dai Yu stopped in her tracks. Although Su Zimo knew that Dai Yu was merely a bloodline phenomenon, he still felt a sense of reluctance and wanted to rush to her. Dai Yu shook her head. There's no need to come over. We can just talk a little more. Actually, your current cultivation is enough. Don't linger too long in the lower world. It's best if you ascend as soon as possible. Dai Yu said, in the upper world, no matter which world, you will experience a lot of discomfort. In the lower world, Su Zimo was the martial emperor who was respected by the 10,000 races and could call the shots for everything. However, in the upper world he would be at the bottom. It was difficult for everyone to accept such a huge difference. Dai Yu said, back then when I brought you to cultivate, I merely wanted to end the karma between us. I did not expect that you could cultivate to this stage. However, since you've come this far, I hope that you can work hard to adapt to the environment of the upper world and survive. Su Zimo could hear the concern and worry in Dai Yu's tone. Dai Yu said, the upper world is a huge forest. It is even more cruel and bloody. You must remember that even I nearly died in the past. Back then, Dai Yu was severely injured and came to Tianhuang mainland. That was when she met Su Zimo. If Dai Yu was already so strong, how strong was the person who could injure her? Su Zimo did not say anything. Right now, even if he wanted to help, he was helpless. However, he made up his mind that he would definitely cultivate as soon as possible after ascending to the upper world and catch up to Dai Yu. When they met again, Su Zimo believed that he would give Dai Yu an even greater surprise. It's time for me to leave. Dai Yu sighed gently. She looked away from Su Zimo and surveyed the entire Tianhuang mainland. She felt a sense of nostalgia towards this minor kiliacosm. Dai Yu's gaze paused on Pingyang town for a while, then on Songlang mountain range and soon on the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Ah! Suddenly, she exclaimed softly and her eyes lit up. She saw the 4 lines of words on the wall of the old temple at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. The first 2 lines were left behind by her many years ago. To become one of the greatest, you have to work on the foundation and be willing to take hardship and serve others. Behind the 2 lines of words were 2 new lines of words that were equally sharp and looked down on the world. Once the fog fades, the radiance shall illuminate through the entire world. Good, good, good. Dai Yu's eyes shone brightly as she nodded repeatedly. She could not help but laugh and praised, what boldness! You're comparable to me. She looked at Su Zimo once more. I'll wait for you in the upper world. I hope that you can break through the mountains and rivers of the upper world and meet me again. With that said, Dai Yu's figure dissipated completely, disappearing from the world. It was not easy for Su Zimo and Dai Yu to meet, but they did not get to talk much. They spent less than half a day together. He had so many more things to say to Dai Yu. Su Zimo looked in that direction and sighed gently in disappointment. Young master, don't be disappointed. This senior said that you can ascend now and you'll be able to see her then. Nian Qi consoled softly at the side with a gentle expression. I'm fine. Su Zimo nodded to Nian Qi and smiled as well. As Nian Qi had said, everything in Tianhuang mainland had basically come to an end. When the time was ripe, he could ascend and leave for the upper world. If he was lucky, he might even be able to ascend to the Great Wilderness. The battle triggered by the primordial 5 races had come to an end. The witch race was destroyed and the god race was imprisoned by Nian Qi, prepared to be brought back to God's mainland. Of the original primordial 9 races, only 7 races were left. Among the 7 races, the dragon, Kuan and barbarian races were the absolute victors. The remaining 4 races suffered immense losses and would probably not recover without 10,000 years. Right after Dai Yu left, a few bubbles appeared in the initially silent 1,000-year blood sea. In the depths of a cemetery in the middle continent, another series of squeaking sounds echoed from an ancient coffin, as though something sharp was scraping against the coffin walls. Blood waves surged in the East Sea. In the blood wave, a small boat strangely appeared. On it stood a fisherman with a green bamboo hat and a fishnet beneath his feet. "It's time to reel in the net." The fisherman raised his head slightly and looked at Tianhuang mainland from afar. He murmured softly and a strange blood glint flashed through his eyes. Chapter 1754 Fate Ring Secret Ground. Chapter 1754 Fate Ring Secret Ground. After Dai Yu mended the heavens and the battle ended, the emperors of the human race as well as the storyteller did not leave. Instead, they stayed temporarily in the Dragon Bone Valley under Su Zimo's suggestion. Nian Qi had already returned to God's mainland with the god race. Su Zimo had always been worried. Although the battle had ended, the blood face had not truly appeared the entire time. The strange thing was that Monk Daming did not appear either. According to his speculation, the calamities of Tianhuang mainland started from 30,000 years ago. From the 1,000 demon tribulation to the astral tribulation, Great Chen catastrophe and eventually, the catastrophe of the 10,000 races today, the blood face had succeeded. Although they won this battle, the 10,000 races of Tianhuang mainland suffered immense losses as well. Blood flowed through Tianhuang mainland and corpses were strewn everywhere. In the end, experts of the upper world were implicated and their bloodlines were an unimaginable tonic for those who cultivated the blood refinement Fiend Sutra. Su Zimo did not even dare to imagine what realm the blood face would grow to. When Dai Yu descended, she did not mention this matter. However, Su Zimo believed that the existence of the blood face could not have been hidden from Dai Yu. However, after Dai Yu descended, she had been fighting with the experts of the upper world and had no free time. In the end, Dai Yu exhausted the last bit of her phenomenon strength and her figure dissipated. The reason why Su Zimo did not ascend to the upper world immediately was also because of the hidden danger of the blood face. After the battle, the emperors of the human race and the various races had to recuperate. Su Zimo persuaded the emperors of the various races to try their best to stay in the Dragon Bone Valley and gather together to prevent any accidents. Although he did not explain the exact reason, the emperors of the various races recalled the changes that happened to the dragon, Kuan and barbarian races before the battle and felt lingering fear. Furthermore, after this battle, the prestige of the martial emperor had already reached its limits and even surpassed the eternal human emperor of the past. Su Zimo was only part of the reason, it was also because of Dai Yu. Since Su Zimo persuaded them, the emperors of the various races did not reject and stayed in the Dragon Bone Valley for the time being. There were many troublesome matters to deal with after the battle, and the emperors delegated the tasks to the patriarchs and mighty figures of the various races. In the blink of an eye, a month passed. Unexpectedly, Tianhuang mainland fell into a long-awaited peace. After that battle, the 10,000 races chose to recuperate in silence. The blood face did not appear either and seemed to have vanished completely. Apart from some severely injured emperors who were recuperating in the Dragon Bone Valley, most of the emperors were mostly healed. This day Su Zimo, the storyteller and Long Ran gathered. Strange, could our previous guess be wrong? The storyteller frowned slightly. Perhaps the blood face has already attempted tribulation transcendence and left Tianhuang mainland. Both the storyteller and Long Ran knew about the existence of the blood face. Back then, Long Ran nearly died in Thousand Demon Valley. I don't think so. Su Zimo shook his head. He believed that the blood face would definitely not leave silently after causing such a huge commotion. Long Ran said, "In my opinion, the 3 of us should join forces and take a look at the 1,000-year blood sea in Thousand Demon Valley. I don't believe that we can't defeat a blood face even if we join forces." Su Zimo frowned slightly and was about to speak when his heart skipped a beat and his gaze intensified. He could sense the existence of the martial Dao Prime body. Kunlun ruins. In the depths of a lake, it was deep and dark without much light. A purple-robed figure seemed to be lying at the bottom of the lake. The martial Dao Prime body was in seclusion here and no one could sense him. Even if a living being passed by him, the martial Dao Prime body would be a lifeless stone in the eyes and senses of that living being. At that moment, the martial Dao Prime body woke up from his seclusion. The figure of the martial Dao Prime body rose slowly from the bottom of the lake and gradually surfaced. He opened his eyes that shone with a resplendent divine light. The martial Dao Prime body had benefited immensely from this seclusion. Initially there was no path ahead for him. Without a path he could not continue cultivating. No matter how many divine powers he fused, he would only be stuck on the spot. Now that he had perfected the martial Dao, he had finally created the remaining path. The cultivation of the martial Dao was different from the Immortal, Buddhist and Fiend Daos right from the beginning. The greatest emphasis of the martial Dao was the cultivation of the body. The body was a gigantic treasure with endless potential waiting to be triggered by cultivators. After the martial Dao Prime body cultivated a martial spirit, his cultivation method was not much different from the Immortal, Buddhist and Fiend sections. There were still essence spirit secret skills, heaven and earth dharma characteristics and conjoint bodies. However, at the Mahayana realm, the martial Dao Prime body did not comprehend any divine powers. Instead, he forcefully smelted the divine powers into his flesh. From that moment on, the martial Dao was once again different from the cultivation techniques of the Immortal, Buddhist and Fiend sects. After cultivating divine powers, one naturally relied on the materialization of the divine powers to fight against their opponents. As for the martial Dao Prime body, he smelted divine powers directly to stimulate the power and potential of his body continuously. The martial Dao Prime body sat cross-D on the lake with his black hair fluttering without any wind. His eyes were closed and the martial spirit fire burned furiously as the power of his body and bloodline condensed continuously within his body. The divine power of the martial Dao furnace fused into every single inch of his flesh and bones, stimulating the life force potential of his body. The meaning of cultivation was to constantly stimulate the power of life. Suddenly, the power within the prime body had reached a critical point and limit. Boom! A loud bang sounded from the body of the martial Dao Prime body. At that moment, it was as though a shackle had been broken through the prime body. A mysterious circular halo appeared behind the martial Dao Prime body and condensed the power of the martial Dao. It interweaved with the Dao of the martial Dao and emitted a powerful power, causing the surrounding void to collapse and the ground to quake. With the illumination of that mysterious halo, the martial Dao Prime body was like a god. Under the envelopment of the mysterious halo, the power of the martial Dao Prime body far surpassed before. The martial Dao Prime body did not stop and continued channeling the power in his body to condense. The aura of the Prime body was still rising rapidly. This was the path created by the martial Dao Prime body. Fate Ring Secret Ground. After the conjoint body realm, one would cultivate the martial Dao and enter the Fate Ring Secret Ground. The Fate Ring was like the growth ring of an ancient tree. The more Fate Rings one had, the more exuberant their life would be and the stronger their physique and bloodline would be. In the deduction of the martial Dao Prime body, there were 9 levels to the Fate Ring Secret Ground. Right now, the martial Dao Prime body had only activated his first Fate Ring. The martial Dao Prime body did not stop cultivating and continued to break through the second Fate Ring. Half a month passed. A second bang sounded from the body of the martial Dao Prime body. It was as though another shackle had been broken. Another halo appeared behind the first mysterious halo. The second Fate Ring. The aura of the martial Dao Prime body surged and he suddenly stood up. The sound of bones cracking could be heard from his body and he exuded the aura of an emperor that looked down on the world. Instantly the weather changed. Many living beings in the Kunlun ruins sensed that aura and their expressions changed, as though a calamity was about to descend the next moment. Chapter 1755 Red Lotus Karmic Fire. Chapter 1755 Red Lotus Karmic Fire. 2 Fate Rings appeared behind the martial Dao Prime body, emitting a purple glow and divine light with a terrifying aura. The martial Dao Prime body sensed the power in his body. Condensing 2 Fate Rings was equivalent to an emperor of the cultivation world. But now, the combat strength of the martial Dao Prime body was comparable to the Green Lotus True Body and Dragon Phoenix True Body. The breakthrough of the martial Dao Prime body did not stop. He wanted to condense his third Fate Ring. Ever since the martial Dao Prime Body smelted divine powers, he had only smelted lesser and greater divine powers and had not smelted supreme divine powers. If a supreme divine power could be smelted, a third fate ring could be formed. However, the martial spirit fire alone was almost unable to smelt supreme divine powers. The martial Dao Prime Body had to master a second type of flame. Furthermore, the grade, level and potential of that flame could not be too low. Up till now, the only flame in Tianhuang mainland that was worthy of the martial Dao Prime Body was the Dragon Phoenix flame. Even the Sun Essence fire of the Golden Crow was inferior in the eyes of the martial Dao Prime Body. However, the Dragon Phoenix flame of the Dragon Phoenix True Body was the innate talent of the Taboo Dragon Phoenix. Unless the martial Dao Prime Body smelted the Dragon Phoenix True Body, there was almost no way he could control that flame. The martial Dao Prime Body had a calm gaze. Over the years, he had smelted many divine powers and countless cultivation techniques and secret skills. His mind contained a large amount of essence and profoundness. The martial Dao Prime Body wanted to comprehend a new flame. Back in the Dao Inheritance Ground, Su Zimo challenged the Three Tribulations domain. The second tribulation of the Three Tribulations domain was the Karmic Flames. At that time, it caused him immense pain and was unforgettable. At that time, the Karmic Flames burning in the Three Tribulations domain were caused by greed, anger and obsession. However, the martial Dao Prime Body smelted countless cultivation techniques and divine powers and cultivated along the way, gaining a deeper understanding of negative karma. The birth of negative karma was not merely due to greed. Killing, stealing and brazen words would result in negative karma. Negative karma was a consequence of the cycle of karma. In other words, every living being was born with karma and accompanied by negative karma. However, some of it was positive karma while others were negative. In the path of cultivation, cultivators engaged in killing and everyone was tainted by countless negative karma. Even Su Zimo was not spared. The negative karma of every living being was like a pile of firewood. As long as there was a single spark, it would ignite into a raging fire that burned their organs and flesh from the inside out. That was karmic flames. As long as the negative karma did not dissipate, the karmic flames would not extinguish. Negative karma exists because of the cycle of karma. With negative karma comes karmic flames. Karma was everywhere. Even if one was a high and mighty emperor, they would be shrouded by endless negative karma. However, no one would ignite it. Even if one comprehended countless divine powers and secret skills, they were still in the loop of karma and possessed negative karma. They could not avoid the pain of the karmic flames. The martial Dao Prime Body had a new comprehension and understanding of the karmic flames of the Three Tribulations domain. A violent storm brewed beside the martial Dao Prime Body. The storm connected heaven and earth and possessed a terrifying killing power, as though it wanted to tear everything apart. Filled with a powerful divine power, the storm shook the world. Supreme Divine Power Storm. Initially, the appearance of the martial Dao Prime Body attracted the attention of countless Kunlun clansmen. There were already many Kunlun clansmen speeding over. Now that the Supreme Divine Power Storm was formed, many Kunlun clansmen were even more shocked. It's that person. Some of the Kunlun clansmen recalled something. Previously, someone came to the Kunlun ruins and took the initiative to cause a divine power storm. I remember it too. Furthermore, that person managed to survive the divine power storm. Another Kunlun clansman said. It was no secret to the many Kunlun clansmen that the martial Dao Prime Body was smelting divine powers in the Kunlun ruins. However, the Kunlun clansmen did not know who he was and could not see the face of the martial Dao Prime Body clearly, they could only see a faint fog. Didn't that person already disappear? A Kunlun clansman was secretly speechless. I thought that this person was torn apart by the divine power storm. To think that his return would attract a supreme divine power storm. Let's go take a look. Kunlun clansmen from all over the Kunlun ruins rushed over. Within the supreme divine power storm. The martial Dao Prime Body did not circulate his blood chi to defend against the supreme divine power storm. Instead, he allowed it to tear through his body continuously. Scarlet lights shone from the body of the martial Dao Prime Body. If anyone's vision could penetrate the divine power storm, they would be shocked to discover that scarlet flames were burning inside and outside the martial Dao Prime Body. Karmic flames. Countless negative karma coiled around the martial Dao Prime Body as well. The power of the karmic flames even caused a supreme divine power storm. However, the strange thing was that the scarlet karmic flames in the martial Dao Prime Body's body did not emanate any divine powers. Karmic fire was not divine powers. It was an extremely unique power. Under the tempering of the karmic flames, the flesh of the martial Dao Prime Body became increasingly condensed and the negative karma in his body was burned cleanly. His bones and organs shone with a resplendent glow. The two fate rings behind the martial Dao Prime Body shone faintly and their auras turned purer, resembling gods. Divine powers are no match for negative karma. The martial Dao Prime Body conjured a strange dermic seal that resembled a lotus with both hands. Suddenly he said 6 words that spread through the Kunlun ruins. It was like a dermic mandate. After those words were said, the countless divine powers in the Kunlun ruins calmed down instantly. The supreme divine power storm that was initially surrounding the martial Dao Prime Body gradually subsided as well. Although the storm was still revolving around the martial Dao Prime Body, it was no longer attacking the latter, it was protecting him. After those words were said, a tremendous might descended from the entire Kunlun ruins. It was as though an even stronger will was above the Kunlun ruins. In the supreme divine power storm, the martial Dao Prime Body smirked. The karmic flames burning in his palms gradually transformed into 2 crystalline red lotuses that resembled treasures of the world. There was no warmth in the 2 red lotus flowers. However, the aura released by the red lotus was extremely terrifying and even the supreme divine power storm had to calm down. A second flame was condensed in the body of the martial Dao Prime Body after the martial spirit fire. Red Lotus Karmic Fire. Although the red lotus karmic fire was not a divine power, it could smelt divine powers. In fact, even the supreme divine powers in the Kunlun ruins could be smelted by the red lotus karmic fire. Under the tempering of the martial spirit fire and red lotus karmic fire, the cultivation speed of the martial Dao Prime Body would increase significantly. Under the tempering of the 2 flames, his body would also become increasingly terrifying. Boom. Right then, another loud bang sounded from the body of the martial Dao Prime Body. Behind him, another purple fate ring condensed outside the second one. His aura surged and his strength rose. The third fate ring appeared and the martial Dao Prime Body had already broken through to an even higher level. Chapter 1756, Annihilation. Chapter 1756, Annihilation. For the past few days, Su Zimo did not cultivate and merely sensed the activity on the side of the martial Dao Prime Body. He only composed himself after the martial Dao Prime Body condensed his third fate ring. After condensing his third fate ring, the power controlled by the martial Dao Prime Body had far surpassed the Green Lotus True Body and Dragon Phoenix True Body. Although the martial Dao Prime Body had yet to undergo the Tribulation Transcendence and ascend, his strength had already surpassed his 2 true bodies. In the blink of an eye, another month had passed since the martial Dao Prime Body came out of seclusion. The emperors that were recuperating in the Dragon Bone Valley had already recovered from their injuries. After that battle, many emperors comprehended something and even broke through one after another to comprehend another supreme divine power. In the past 2 months, many patriarchs comprehended supreme divine powers and became emperors. During this period of time, the 10,000 races of Tianhuang mainland rested and recuperated. It was unusually peaceful and the emperors of the various races were prepared to bid farewell. Outside the Dragon Bone Valley, the emperors of the human race bid farewell to Su Zimo and the others. Mystic Emperor, when are you prepared to undergo the Tribulation Transcendence? Monk Kongyan asked. I'm the Palace Guardian after all and have to guard Tianhuang mainland for a few years. I can only leave after I find the next Palace Guardian. The storyteller smiled. Kong Yun, you've already comprehended 3 supreme divine powers and can prepare to undergo the Tribulation Transcendence and ascend. We'll talk about that later. Monk Kong Yun shook his head gently and hesitated. Why? The storyteller asked, what's the problem? Long Ran said, although there's a slim chance of survival for Tribulation Transcendence, no one can avoid it. We have to take this step eventually. Monk Kong Yun smiled bitterly and sighed. To be honest, I'm a little afraid, Sai. The storyteller was silent. The battle 2 months ago had a huge impact on the hearts of the emperors of Tianhuang mainland. Against that apocalyptic power, even emperors were like ants that could die at any moment. For someone like Su Zimo, even if it was not for Daiyu, he had a strong determination and was unshakable. Naturally he was fearless and pressed forward. However, most people would inevitably feel a sense of fear and hesitation. Su Zimo's gaze shifted. The other emperors fell silent as well. It was clear that Monk Kongyun was not alone. An emperor suddenly said, "Actually, the upper world isn't as beautiful as we imagined." "That's right. Why are we cultivating? Isn't it so that we can live a long life?" Another emperor added, "However, there's a 90% chance of death if we attempt the tribulation transcendence to ascend. Even if we survive and ascend to the upper world, we'll only be at the bottom of the hierarchy and anyone can kill us. If that's the case, I might as well stay in the lower world and roam freely." The emperor expressed the thoughts of many emperors. Actually, over the years, there had been very few emperors who attempted tribulation transcendence. On the one hand, it was dangerous. On the other hand, it was also a form of fear towards an unknown place like the upper world. The worries of the emperors were not without reason. If they stayed in Tianhuang mainland, even if they exhausted their lifespans, they would have tens of thousands of years to live. However, if they chose to attempt tribulation transcendence to ascend, there's a chance they might die. Long Ran pouted. "What's there to be afraid of? The path of cultivation is not a smooth one to begin with. Since you've chosen this path, don't turn back." Naturally, Long Ran was fearless towards the upper world. Su Zimo believed that the Azura Yen Beichen would definitely choose to ascend as well. That was because Yen Beichen had an obsession in his heart. He wanted to head to the upper world and search for a power that could revive Qingpian Ran. This battle brought fear to everyone else. However, it was a form of hope for the Azura Yen Beichen. He had witnessed the power of the upper world. He believed that as long as he ascended to the upper world, he would definitely be able to find a way to revive Qingpian Ran. After a moment of silence, Su Zimo looked at Monk Kongyun and the other emperors and said slowly, "You guys are not wrong in your words and thoughts. If you stay in Tianhuang mainland, you might be able to live for tens of thousands of years. However, if you attempt the tribulation transcendence to ascend, there's a chance you might die immediately. However..." Su Zimo paused for a moment. "Only by ascending to the upper world will there be a chance of true longevity. Only by ascending to the upper world can one gain greater power and obtain a lifespan of 200,000 years, 300,000 years or even longer. That's the only place where one can gain more knowledge and expand their horizons." Monk Kongyun and the other emperors were deep in thought. The storyteller did not persuade further. For Monk Kongyun and the other emperors, staying in Tianhuang mainland might be the best choice for them. Tribulation transcendence was extremely dangerous to begin with and there was a high chance of death. Now that Monk Kongyun was filled with fear, his chances of transcending the tribulation were even slimmer. Right then, a streak of light tore through the air and arrived before the many emperors in the blink of an eye. This person had a Confucian crown on his head and a pale face without any beard. He was slightly plump and held a folding fan in his hands. He was Lin Xuanji of Enigma Palace and was also the storyteller of this generation. "What? What happened?" The storyteller frowned when he saw Lin Xuanji's strange expression. Lin Xuanji composed himself and said, "The Bloodvine race was destroyed and hundreds of thousands of clansmen died without exception." Ah. When the emperors heard that, their expressions changed. Although the Bloodvine race was defeated this time round, they still had a few emperors and more than 10 patriarchs. Su Zimo did not annihilate them either. In just 2 months, hundreds of thousands of Bloodvines were killed. "The emperors of the Bloodvine race are dead too?" the storyteller asked with a grim expression. "Dead." Lin Xuanji gulped. "When I heard the news, I couldn't believe it and went to the ancestral ground of the Bloodvine race personally to take a look." At that point, a look of fear flashed through Lin Xuanji's eyes, as though he recalled a terrifying scene with lingering fear. That place has already turned into a sea of blood without any signs of life. Countless Bloodvine clansmen died regardless of their cultivation realms. Lin Xuanji said. "You're way too reckless." The storyteller was a little reproachful and turned to look at Su Zimo with a questioning expression. Who could have done it? The terrifying thing about this is that the entire process of exterminating the entire Bloodvine race happened in silence. Even emperors like us did not notice it at all. Su Zimo frowned and thought. His first reaction was Monk Daming. However, what was Monk Daming's motive for doing that? Had Monk Daming already cultivated to such an extent after they did not meet for a period of time? Or rather, was it the blood face? However, on second thought, Su Zimo shook his head. The blood face was closely related to Dao Lord Blood Fiend. However, Dao Lord Blood Fiend had half the bloodline of the Bloodvine race in his body, and there was no reason for him to do such a thing. How much hatred did someone have to possess in order to exterminate an entire race? Chapter 1757 Tao Wu Demon Emperor. Chapter 1757, Tao Wu Demon Emperor. Let's go to Thousand Demon Valley and Thousand Year Blood Sea. A cold glint flashed through Su Zimo's eyes as he said in a deep voice. No matter who destroyed the Bloodvine race, he had to head to the Thousand Year Blood Sea and resolve the latent danger of the Blood Face. All right. The storyteller and the other emperors agreed without hesitation. All the emperors present tore through the void with ease and descended from the Dragon Bone Valley, arriving above the Thousand Demon Valley. This time round, Su Zimo and the others did not hide their tracks. Now that many emperors appeared at the same time after the battle of the 10,000 races, many living beings were attracted, wondering if something big had happened again. This time round, Su Zimo's Green Lotus True Body and Dragon Phoenix True Body moved at the same time. The Martial Dao Prime Body was still cultivating and smelting divine powers in the Kunlun ruins, so he did not appear. Su Zimo and the others arrived above the Thousand Year Blood Sea and looked down. Back when Su Zimo, Monkey and the others first saw the Blood Sea, they were extremely shocked. Right now, he had already cultivated to the Emperor realm and stood at the peak of Tianhuang mainland. In his eyes, the Blood Sea was like a blood-colored lake. Strange. Monk Kong Yun frowned. There's a strange power emanating from the Blood Sea that even my spirit consciousness can't detect. Apart from the storyteller and the other emperors did not know about the Blood Face. This is the battlefield of the Thousand Demon Tribulation back then. An emperor looked at the corpses surrounding the Thousand Year Blood Sea and murmured. Su Zimo looked at the bones beneath his feet and the Thousand Year Blood Sea. Suddenly, he narrowed his eyes and exclaimed softly. Looking down, he suddenly realized that the Thousand Year Blood Sea beneath his feet was like a blood-colored eyeball. The white bones that surrounded him were like the whites of the eye. The white bones and Blood Sea formed a strange blood-colored eye. That eye seemed to be staring at the many emperors in midair. A strange glint flashed through the eye. At the same time, ripples appeared in the Thousand Year Blood Sea. Strange, why do I feel like I'm being watched? An emperor murmured uneasily. This place is truly sinister, another emperor added. Ah. Suddenly, an emperor exclaimed with a shocked expression. He pointed at the Thousand Year Blood Sea beneath his feet and said with a trembling voice, it seemed to have blinked just now. What do you mean by blink? Stop making a fuss and explain yourself. Long Ran frowned. That's right. The emperor seemed to be extremely shocked and could not explain for a moment. With a grim expression, Su Zimo said slowly, this Thousand Year Blood Sea should be the eye of a living being, and it blinked earlier. What? The storyteller, Long Ran and the other emperors were shocked. Roar. Suddenly, a deafening roar sounded from the depths of the Thousand Demon Valley, as though a powerful fiend demon had awakened. That roar spread through the entire Tianhuang mainland. Be it in any corner of Tianhuang mainland or any living being, they could hear it clearly and sense the terrifying power contained in the roar. The living beings of Thousand Demon Valley trembled and did not dare to move. Even some grand demons and old demons were not spared. Above the Thousand Year Blood Sea, some weaker emperors felt their ears buzz and their bloodlines floated uncontrollably under the roar. The emperors were pale and bewildered. Crack, crack, crack. Immediately after, gigantic cracks appeared on the ground beneath the emperor's feet and extended in all directions with the Thousand Year Blood Sea as the center. An extremely strong demonic chi and blood stench emanated from the cracks. This time round all the emperors could see it clearly. Indeed, the Thousand Year Blood Sea revealed a gaze that only living beings possessed. Ridicule, cruelty and mockery. The ground beneath everyone's feet protruded slowly, forming a mound the size of a mountain, as though a supreme fiend was about to break out of it. Boom, boom. There was a loud bang and the ground shook. A gigantic figure broke through the ground and rose rapidly. Demonic chi coiled around its body and its blood chi surged. 100 feet, 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet. In the blink of an eye, the gigantic figure had already broken through the height of 10,000 feet and was almost indomitable. Burying its knees on the ground, it waved its arms with torrential flames and a terrifying might that swept through the world. Countless rocks flew everywhere. The gigantic rocks created by the rise of the figure contained immense power. Many emperors retreated and scattered. Against that terrifying aura, Long Ran revealed his dragon form. However, his dragon form was only slightly more than 10,000 feet long and was not much thicker than the living being's arm. The moment Long Ran transformed into his dragon form, the terrifying living being waved its gigantic palm and grabbed the 10,000 feet long dragon in his palm, as though he was tearing through the void and dust. The claws of the terrifying living being extended one after another and pierced Long Ran's protective dragon scales instantly, leaving bloody holes on his body. Long Ran struggled. However, Long Ran, who was more than 10,000 feet tall, was like a python that could not break free from the grip of this powerful living being. Roar! Long Ran roared in pain. The dragon roar shocked the 10,000 races. At that distance, the dragon roar could release an extremely terrifying killing power. However, the terrifying living being did not seem to have heard anything. Exerting strength in its arms, it roared and tore Long Ran into two, dyeing the void red with his dragon blood. That scene was extremely shocking. The bloodline of the dragon race was extremely strong. Even if someone could kill an emperor of the dragon race, there was no way they could tear the body of an emperor of the dragon race apart. How terrifying was the power released? The emperors were stunned on the spot with pale expressions. At that moment, it was too late even if Su Zimo attacked. When Long Ran saw that the situation was bad, he abandoned his body and escaped with his essence spirit. When Long Ran's essence spirit escaped, the terrifying living being did not chase after it and merely harumphed in disdain. It grabbed the half of the dragon that was bleeding and stuffed it into its mouth. Crack, crack, crack. The living being bit the flesh of an emperor of the dragon race and devoured it in huge mouthfuls. Long Ran escaped and hurriedly circulated blood rebirth to reconstruct his body. Even so, he was still shocked and furious when he saw his body that he had abandoned earlier on devoured by this terrifying living being. It's way too strong. Su Zimo's expression turned grim. The strength of that living being had even surpassed the former heavenly god emperor, Hell Witch Emperor, and the others. At that moment, the dust gradually dispersed and Su Zimo's gaze landed on the living being. The living being had a human face, tiger legs and pitch-black short fur all over its body. On both sides of its mouth, a pair of sharp pig teeth soared into the skies. Behind the living being was a gigantic and thick tail that swept back and forth. It had a ferocious gaze and a blood glint as it glared at Su Zimo and the others. Tao Wu. Frowning slightly, Su Zimo compared it to the records in the ancient books and the name of a ferocious beast flashed through his mind. Tao Wu Demon Emperor. Right then, the storyteller and the other emperors exclaimed with shocked expressions. Chapter 1758, Astral Immortal Emperor. Chapter 1758, Astral Immortal Emperor. Impossible. The storyteller was shocked and his eyes were filled with disbelief. The Tao Wu Demon Emperor should have died in the Thousand Demon Tribulation a long time ago. How can he still be alive? Su Zimo recalled that he had read about the Thousand Demon Tribulation back in Enigma Palace. Indeed, a demon emperor died in the Thousand Demon Tribulation, the Tao Wu. Ha 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 ha. The Tao Wu Demon Emperor chewed on the dragon flesh as he reared his head in laughter with blood splattering everywhere. He surveyed his surroundings with bloodshot eyes and a menacing expression as he shouted, "You guys are finally here. I've been waiting for a long time. This demon is strong. Retreat for now." With a grim expression, Su Zimo sent a voice transmission to the storyteller and the other emperors without hesitation. Even his two true bodies might not be a match for this Tao Wu Demon Emperor, let alone other emperors. The other emperors would only die if they advanced. The storyteller and the others had terrible expressions as well. The terror of this Tao Wu Demon Emperor had far exceeded their expectations. A strange fluctuation appeared in the void. A phantom-like figure sneaked towards the Tao Wu Demon Emperor silently. It was Night Spirit. After the battle of the 10,000 races, Night Spirit had already comprehended two supreme divine powers. Even if he had to face the encirclement of the Hell Witch Emperor and the others again, Night Spirit was absolutely confident that he would be able to kill them one by one. However, Su Zimo's heart sank when he saw that. Before he could warn, Night Spirit had already appeared and attacked, grabbing the Tao Wu's neck with his gigantic, menacing claws. His sharp tail streaked through the air with a dark light and stabbed towards the head of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor, arriving instantly. A mocking look flashed through the eyes of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor. Without even turning back, he reached out with his hand and grabbed Night Spirit's body in a flash before the latter's killing move descended. It was too fast. The speed of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor was even faster than Night Spirit. His attack was released after but arrived sooner. His speed was not the only terrifying thing. In the palm of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor, Night Spirit could not even break free and could only growl. The Tao Wu Demon Emperor exerted strength in his palm and crackling sounds echoed from Night Spirit's body. His bones felt like they were about to be crushed by the Tao Wu Demon Emperor. The Dragon Phoenix True Body's gaze intensified as he channeled his essence spirit. A gray fog shrouded his fingertip as though it contained the flow of time. Fleeting moment. The power of time ignored one's cultivation realm. No matter how strong the Tao Wu Demon Emperor was, he could not withstand the passage of time. However, the moment the supreme divine power was about to be formed, the Dragon Phoenix True Body felt a wave of dizziness in his mind. His bloodline surged and he swayed. The gray fog on the Dragon Phoenix True Body's fingertip dissipated silently. He had failed. The Dragon Phoenix True Body had a lost expression. He did not know what happened at all. The dizziness came without any warning and was completely illogical. How dare a puny divine Ho challenge me? The Tao Wu Demon Emperor sneered and exerted strength in his palm. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Right in front of the Emperors, the taboo divine Ho was crushed into pieces by the palm of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor and fresh blood flowed slowly through the gaps between his fingers. Night Spirit realized that something was amiss and his essence spirit had already escaped to reconstruct his body. Don't go. Su Zimo sent a voice transmission with his spirit consciousness hurriedly in a stern tone. The Tao Wu Demon Emperor brought his palm that was stained with the divine Ho's blood to his mouth and extended his gigantic tongue to lick the flesh on it. He grinned with a menacing expression. The Emperors felt their scalps tingle and felt a chill run down their spines as their breathing turned hurried. Hee hee, you guys want to escape? The Tao Wu Demon Emperor laughed. How naive. Boom. Boom. The moment he said that, a loud bang sounded behind the Emperors. The Emperors turned to look. A gray stone coffin burst forth from a cemetery at the back mountain of Heavenly Dipper sect and soared into the skies, hovering in midair. Creak. An ear-piercing sound echoed from the stone coffin. Battle corpse. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. Immediately after, right in front of the Emperors, the lid of the stone coffin slid down bit by bit before falling to the ground. A figure stood up slowly from within. This was not a corpse but a living person. Even though he was in the ancient coffin, there was no aura of death around him and his life force was exuberant. The person wore a dark golden Taoist robe with countless stars imprinted on it. His black hair fluttered and his eyes shone with starlight. He had an extraordinary bearing and was elegant. Patriarch Astral. Many emperors present exclaimed with widened eyes in disbelief when they saw that person. Su Zimo frowned as well. The origin of the astral tribulation was largely related to Patriarch Astral. However, Patriarch Astral already died in the astral tribulation. To think that this person who was already dead was now standing alive in front of the emperors. What was even more frightening was that this person had already surpassed the level of a patriarch a long time ago. Right now, the aura he emitted was comparable to the Tao Wu Demon Emperor and echoed with him from afar. This was no longer Patriarch Astral, but the Astral Immortal Emperor. An emperor could not withstand the pressure and tore through the void, wanting to escape. The void in front of the emperor had just cracked when the Astral Immortal Emperor smiled and slapped in that direction through the layers of space. Bang. The emperor's body stiffened and his eyes widened. The next moment, the emperor's body exploded and his flesh was absorbed by the dimensional tear before him. His essence spirit fell into the dimensional tear and without the protection of his body, it was torn apart by the wild currents of the void and died on the spot. Pust. The emperor's expressions changed as they gasped. Although the emperor who escaped earlier on had only comprehended a single supreme divine power, the fact that the astral immortal emperor could kill an emperor with such ease meant that his strength had far surpassed their imaginations. The appearance of a single Tao Wu demon emperor already felt like an unstoppable calamity for the emperors present. But now, another astral immortal emperor had appeared. Su Zimo's expression turned grim. He knew that apart from the two terrifying emperors, there should be another one. Right then, a golden light tore through the air from the direction of the East Sea and fled over. The emperors had powerful eyesight and could see everything clearly. The Golden Light was an emperor of the Golden Crow race. At that moment, the Golden Crow Emperor had a horrified expression and fled in the direction of Tianhuang mainland, as though he was greatly frightened. Swoosh! A gigantic white light descended from the skies with an unstoppable power. It was incomparably ferocious, as though it wanted to split the world apart. Heavenly Slash! The storyteller exclaimed softly. Heavenly Slash was a supreme divine power of the Tao of the Saber. It was the most ferocious and powerful, something that few divine powers could match. Chapter 1759 Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. Chapter 1759 Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. Sensing danger, the Golden Crow Emperor paused hurriedly and channeled his supreme divine power. His entire body curled up like a blazing sun. The Heavenly Slash descended. Without much of a pause, the Heavenly Slash's light sliced the blazing sun into two and fresh blood splattered onto the East Sea. The Golden Crow Emperor was dead. The Saber Emperor is probably the only one in this world who can release the Heavenly Slash, Monk Kong Yun said sternly. Is it Hermit? The storyteller frowned slightly. Although Hermit is strong from what I know, he has only comprehended 3 supreme divine powers. When did he become so strong? Although it was only a single Heavenly Slash, it could be seen that the combat strength of the attacker far surpassed the emperors of the various races. Another emperor asked in confusion. Furthermore, the strange thing is that he hasn't appeared for any major events in Tianhuang mainland in recent years. The emperors of the human race looked over. Above the East Sea, a small boat floated over in the vast smoke. Although it seemed slow, it was extremely fast. On the small boat stood a man in a green woven rush raincoat and straw hat. From afar he looked like a fisherman. It's Hermit. Monk Kong Yun said, no matter what, the fact that he's able to arrive now isn't a bad thing for us. Su Zimo shook his head gently and said sternly, everyone watch out. He's hostile. The Emperor's heart skipped a beat. Right then the small boat had already arrived at the shore. Hermit raised his head slightly and looked towards the middle continent, striding over. Behind him, the void split open and figures walked out one after another. They emitted powerful auras and were all emperors. The Mountain Barbarian Emperor who betrayed the barbarian race, the Cloud Boat Kuan Emperor and the Tiger Kuan Emperor were among them. Apart from the barbarian and Kuan races, there were also other emperors of the primordial races following Hermit. In addition, there were some emperors of the human and demon races. In the blink of an eye, there were close to 20 emperors behind Hermit. Tian Tao. The storyteller frowned and glared at one of the emperors. You're not dead. Patriarch Tian Tao was an elder of Enigma Palace and was long in his twilight years. Later on he disappeared. Everyone thought that Patriarch Tian Tao had long exhausted his lifespan and passed away somewhere, leaving behind his inheritance. To think that Tian Tao had already become an emperor and was following behind Hermit. Cloud Boat Tiger Kuan. When the Kuan Empress Yin Lan saw the 2 traitors who betrayed the Kuan race and killed many of her clansmen, her eyes turned red and she wanted to charge out with a murderous aura. The Dragon Phoenix true body grabbed her hurriedly. Yin Lan had just advanced to the Emperor realm and was definitely not a match for the Cloud Boat Kuan Emperor and Tiger Kuan Emperor. Furthermore, now was not the time to resolve the feud of the Kuan race. If they did not handle it well, all of them would die here. Before long, Hermit arrived above Thousand Demon Valley. Hermit, the Tao Wu Demon Emperor and the Astral Immortal Emperor stood in 3 different directions, forming a triangle that surrounded Su Zimo and the other emperors. Hermit held a fishing net in one hand and a slender fishing rod in the other. He looked at Su Zimo and the others with a rueful expression and sighed. I've waited for this day for a long time. You were the one who manipulated the calamity of the barbarian Kuan and dragon races from behind the scenes. Your goal was to trigger a war between the 10,000 races. The storyteller said sternly. Sort of. Hermit smiled and did not deny. Where's the Sea Dragon Empress? Long Ran could not help but ask sternly. The Sea Dragon Empress had once killed the Qin Dragon Emperor and caused a massive battle between the 10,000 races. Although there were many emperors behind Hermit, there was no sign of the Sea Dragon Empress. The Sea Dragon Empress is here. Hermit removed his bamboo hat and smiled sinisterly. In front of everyone, he transformed into a white-haired old lady. It was the appearance of the Sea Dragon Empress. The supreme divine power, myriad transformations. The emperors widened their eyes in shock. If everyone had not witnessed it personally, they would not have believed that the old lady with the blood chi of the dragon race was the transformation of a human. Under normal circumstances, myriad transformations did not possess any killing power. However, to be able to use myriad transformations to such an extent to hide from the senses of all the emperors, everyone felt chills run down their spines. The old lady said slowly, although the Qin Dragon Emperor is old, he still has some tricks up his sleeves. If I hadn't done it personally, no one else would have been able to. The death of the Qin Dragon Emperor left many doubts. At that time, Su Zimo had already questioned how the Sea Dragon Empress could kill the Qin Dragon Emperor in a single strike given her strength. Now those doubts were resolved. You're not Hermit. Su Zimo shook his head slowly. Of course not. The old lady's eyes shone with a blood glint. That Hermit was stubborn and refused to submit to me. He was killed by me a long time ago. Dao Lord Blood Fiend. Su Zimo glared at the old lady fixedly and said slowly, since things have come to this, there's no need to hide anything. Let me see your true appearance. Ah, Dao Lord Blood Fiend? How is that possible? The emperors were shocked. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, the old lady reared her head in laughter and shuddered. Right in front of the emperors, she transformed into a black-robed blood-haired man with bloodshot eyes. He was extremely handsome and exuded a demonic aura from head to toe. Hands behind his back, he looked at Su Zimo and nodded. Very good, you've indeed guessed my identity. It's really you. Although the storyteller was mentally prepared, he was still shocked when he saw the blood-haired man. Dao Lord Blood Fiend. It's really him. He's not dead. Some of the older emperors recognized Dao Lord Blood Fiend's face and exclaimed. Suddenly, the blood-haired man attacked and grabbed an emperor who spoke through the void. Poof. The emperor's body turned into a ball of blood. All his bones and organs were almost fused into the blood. The blood-haired man was the creator of the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. That fiend technique was so terrifying when released by him. Even an emperor could not defend against a single move from him. The blood-haired man opened his mouth and sucked, causing a blood-colored streak of light to shoot into his mouth. He smiled sinisterly and wiped away the blood from the corner of his mouth with his finger, saying slowly, I'm already an emperor and my title is the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. Anyone who calls me by the wrong title deserves to be killed. The emperors were pale with shocked expressions. The Tao Wu Demon Emperor and Astral Immortal Emperor already felt unstoppable to the emperors present. However, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor before them made the emperors feel a sense of fear. He was bloodthirsty, violent and unfathomable. This Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was even more terrifying than the Tao Wu Demon Emperor and Astral Immortal Emperor. Su Zimo remained silent. The mastermind had finally appeared, but there were still many questions in his mind. Chapter 1760, Secret of the Catastrophes. Chapter 1760, Secret of the Catastrophes. Given the capabilities of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor and the nature of the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, it was only logical for him to control those emperors. Some of the emperors here were once patriarchs whose lifespans were almost up. If they could not break through, they could only die after expending their lifespans. At that point of time, a Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra dangled before them. It was a cultivation technique that could increase their lifespans and allow them to break through their cultivation realms. Who could resist such temptation? Even someone as strong as Monk Daming chose to compromise and cultivate the fiend technique to break out of the ancient coffin after being trapped for 40,000 years. However, Su Zimo still had many questions. Given the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's talent and methods, logically speaking, he should have reached the peak of Tianhuang mainland a long time ago. Why did he have to wait so many years and launch Catastrophes in secret? What was the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's motive? Why did the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor save him back then? The Tao Wu Demon Emperor had nothing to do with Su Zimo, so why did the former help him back in the 1,000-year Blood Sea? How many secrets did Monk Daming know? What role did he play in this? Countless questions circled around Su Zimo's mind. You were the one who destroyed the Blood Vine race. Su Zimo asked. That's right. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor nodded and did not hide anything. Why? Su Zimo asked again. Half of the Blood Vine race's bloodline flowed in the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's body. How could he have done such a cruel thing to the Blood Vine race? That's because they deserve to die. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's eyes were filled with endless hatred. As though he recalled something, he said slowly with a dark expression, "All the blood vines deserve to be killed. You guys too." The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's gaze shifted to the storyteller and the other emperors as he said coldly, "Back then, all of you from the Immortal, Buddhist and Fiend sects hunted me down and none of you were willing to help me. Today I'm going to make you guys pay. I'm going to make all of you submit to me. I'm going to turn all of you into my blood slaves. Tianhuang mainland is under my control. I want to become the eternal Fiend Emperor. I want to create a race that belongs to me. I want Tianhuang mainland to become the turf of my blood race." His words spread through the entire Tianhuang mainland and contained an unparalleled will. The 10,000 races were silent. The emperors were dumbfounded and felt a chilling intent. Su Zimo was shocked as well. Even he had not expected the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor to have such ambitions. Not only did he want to rule over Tianhuang mainland, he even wanted to turn all living beings in Tianhuang mainland into his slaves and listen to his orders. The 10,000 races, human race, demon race and primordial 9 races of Tianhuang mainland would all fall under a single title, the Blood Race. The methods of the 3 emperors present, the Tao Wu Demon Emperor, Astral Immortal Emperor and Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, were way too terrifying. They could kill all the emperors present with a single move. The emperors were at a loss. Right now there were only 2 options before the emperors. They could either die or choose to become a blood slave of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. The storyteller took a deep breath and tried his best to compose himself. He looked at the Tao Wu Demon Emperor and Astral Immortal Emperor not far away and said, "Blood Fiend, it's fine if you want to dominate Tianhuang mainland. However, even the 2 of them won't agree if you want the 10,000 races of Tianhuang mainland to become part of the blood race, right?" The Tao Wu Demon Emperor was a demon while the Astral Immortal Emperor was a human. In the storyteller's opinion, even if they had joined forces with the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, it was unlikely that they would allow him to take over the demon and human races as well. If he could sow discord between the 3 of them, there might be a chance of survival. They'll definitely agree. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor laughed sinisterly. "That's because they're just clones that I condensed." The moment he said that, the faces of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, Tao Wu Demon Emperor and Astral Immortal Emperor changed into terrifying blood faces. 3 blood faces opened their mouths and laughed wildly. Ha 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 ha. The laughter was ear-piercing and shuddering. The emperors felt deep despair when they looked at the 3 identical blood faces. Some emperors looked at Su Zimo instinctively. Everyone knew that the current martial emperor had condensed 2 true bodies, a taboo dragon phoenix and a creation green lotus. They were independent and invincible. However, they did not expect the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor before them to be even more terrifying. Apart from his prime body, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor had also condensed 2 independent clones that had grown to such a terrifying extent. Even without the other emperors, his Tao Wu Demon Emperor and Astral Immortal Emperor clones were enough to rule over Tianhuang mainland. Almost all the cloning techniques in the cultivation world did not have essence spirits and could not be cultivated alone. It was also a freak coincidence that Su Zimo's 2 true bodies could be formed. His cultivation path was almost impossible to replicate. However, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's clone technique was definitely a top-tier cultivation technique. Night Spirit had once told Su Zimo that there were similar cloning techniques in the upper world. In fact, Su Zimo suspected that the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's clone technique came from the upper world. More than 1,000 years ago, my fiend technique could have been cultivated to the perfected stage. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor shifted his gaze towards Su Zimo and said hatefully, "Unfortunately, something happened more than 1,000 years ago. Otherwise, I would have appeared a long time ago and Tianhuang mainland would have been under my control." More than 1,000 years ago? The emperors looked at Su Zimo instinctively. Under normal circumstances, Desolate Marshal's cultivation realm shouldn't have been high 1,000 years ago. How could he have had any interactions with the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor? More than 1,000 years ago? Long Ran frowned slightly in deep thought. "I got it." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and his eyes shone brightly as he said slowly, "Your clone technique did not only condense 2 clones, there were 3. Ah. The emperors were alarmed. 2 clones were already so terrifying, let alone 3. Carry on. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor smiled gently and nodded to Su Zimo, indicating for him to continue. Su Zimo said, 30,000 years ago you caused the 1,000-demon tribulation, causing blood to flow like rivers and corpses to be strewn everywhere. Your final goal was to condense this clone of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor. It's the same for the Astral Tribulation 20,000 years ago. You did it to condense this clone of the Astral Immortal Emperor. The Great Qian Tribulation 10,000 years ago was for the third clone you wanted to cultivate. This third clone is buried at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Long Ran shuddered and finally understood. A look of admiration flashed through the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's eyes as he nodded. Very good. Continue. Su Zimo sneered. Unfortunately, when your third clone was about to be created successfully, someone went to the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley more than 1,000 years ago. This person wanted to head to the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley to retrieve a supreme treasure of the Buddhist monasteries. However, she discovered the existence of your clone and destroyed it in passing. Everyone was confused and could not understand who Su Zimo was referring to. To think that someone could destroy the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's clone and severely injure him. At that point, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor seemed to have recalled something and his expression changed indeterminately. A look of fear flashed through his eyes before turning into deep hatred. He followed Su Zimo's words and said coldly, "That's right. She was none other than your Miss Dai." Chapter 1761, Daming Buddha Emperor. Chapter 1761, Daming Buddha Emperor. At that point the emperors finally understood. More than 1,000 years ago, that peerless woman in blood-colored robes came to Tianhuang mainland and destroyed a clone of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. If not for the blood-robed woman, Tianhuang mainland would have long become the world of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. At the same time the emperors suddenly realized something. Now that the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor chose to appear, it meant that his third clone had been condensed. The fiend technique of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was already perfected. In that case, the reason why you triggered the Battle of the 10,000 Races was to cultivate your third clone. The storyteller said sternly. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor extended his finger and shook it gently. Cultivating a third clone is only one of my motives, but it's not my true intentions. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor turned to Su Zimo and said slowly, "My true goal is you." "Me?" Su Zimo raised his brow. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor said, "I wanted to see your final trump cards. The Battle of the 10,000 Races was the best opportunity for that. I was careless in the past and committed a huge mistake causing a clone to be destroyed. I won't make the same mistake twice. Since that woman thinks so highly of you, I was worried that she might have left some trump cards for you. Therefore, the true goal of this 10,000 race meet is to force out your final trump cards." The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor smiled smugly. Indeed, that woman appeared. The storyteller's expression was terrible. The terror of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was not only because of the combat strength he displayed, but also because of his intelligence that was demonic and almost flawless. Enigma Palace specialized in divination and mapped out the lives of the masses. As the storyteller he was even more proficient in this Dao. However, the strategy displayed by the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was far above his. Right now, the crack of Tianhuang mainland had already healed and no expert of the upper world could descend. No one could suppress this fiend. Su Zimo's gaze shifted between the Tao Wu Demon Emperor and Astral Immortal Emperor. Suddenly he said, "Of your two clones, one is a Demon Emperor while the other is an Immortal Emperor. As for yourself, you are a Fiend Emperor. If I'm not wrong, your third clone should be an Emperor of the Buddhist monasteries." Smart. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor could not help but exclaim and clap. Suddenly, Su Zimo thought of a terrifying possibility and his heart sank. He glared at the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor and asked sternly, "Where's your third clone? Who is it?" "That's me." Right then a voice sounded not far away. It was gentle and calm, like Sanskrit, piercing into one's heart with a soothing charm. The emperors turned towards the voice. Su Zimo did not look at it. That was because he already knew who it was from that voice. Monk Daming. Not far away, a white-robed monk walked over slowly with a calm expression. His long hair that covered half his face had already been shaved. "Monk Daming, it's indeed you." Although the storyteller knew about this long ago, he was still shocked when he truly saw Monk Daming. The other emperors were even more shocked. To think that both monster incarnates of 40,000 years ago would have returned. Su Zimo turned to look at Monk Daming as well. Monk Daming nodded slightly at Su Zimo and smiled. Suddenly, Su Zimo felt that the current Monk Daming seemed to have changed. It was an indescribable feeling, and it wasn't just because of his shaved long hair. So, you're the third clone he wants to condense. The Daming Buddha Emperor. Su Zimo sighed gently. I should have guessed. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor looked at Monk Daming as well and sighed wistfully. We meet again after 40,000 years. That's right, we meet again. Monk Daming smiled gently. The two of them greeted one another like good friends. Su Zimo could vaguely tell that something was different. Monk Daming was different from the Tao Wu Demon Emperor and the Astral Immortal Emperor. It was as though he had not been completely refined by the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. Monk Daming still retained his own will and thoughts. In other words, the Monk Daming before them right now could not be considered as the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's third clone yet. However, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was in no hurry, nor was he surprised. Everything was clearly under his control. Monk Daming, you're the only one qualified to be my opponent in this generation. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor said, even Desolate Martial is nothing in my eyes. In Tianhuang mainland, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was probably the only one who did not take the Martial Emperor seriously. He was the only one who was qualified to say something like that. I wouldn't dare to. Monk Daming shook his head gently. However, you've underestimated the Martial Emperor. Monk Daming looked at Su Zimo deeply before looking at the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. The Martial Emperor is stronger than you imagine. Fufu with just his two true bodies? The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor sneered with disdain. Monk Daming shook his head and did not explain. Su Zimo watched coldly from the sidelines in silence. He had a feeling that Monk Daming knew something. Could Monk Daming already know the true identity of the Martial Dao Prime Body? The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor said, 40,000 years ago when we fought for the fourth time, I was severely injured, but you were soft-hearted and persuaded me to convert to Buddhism. That was the reason why I got the chance to retaliate against you. Actually, I lost that battle. The emperors were dumbfounded. The shocking battle between Monk Daming and the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor 40,000 years ago was a mystery that even Enigma Palace had no records of. The only ones who truly knew about the situation were the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor and Monk Daming. Although the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor only said a few words, he roughly described the situation of that battle. Su Zimo was shocked as well. Initially he thought that Monk Daming suffered a crushing defeat. To think that there would be such a detail. Monk Daming shook his head. All is fair in war. In the end, I was the one who lost that battle. There's nothing to argue about. Both of them were proud people. Although the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor won unfairly in the past, he did not hide anything today and revealed everything. Monk Daming was even more calm and did not argue about the outcome of that battle. That was their pride. You were kind enough not to kill me back then. Since I won, I naturally won't kill you either. Suddenly, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor smiled. You wanted to persuade me to convert to Buddhism, but I refused. Since you're so compassionate and benevolent, I'll definitely let someone like you fall into the Fiend Dao. Suddenly, Su Zimo realized. The battle 40,000 years ago was clear. Part of the reason why the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor did not kill Monk Daming was because he appreciated the other party. More than that, it was because although Monk Daming initially won that battle, he did not kill the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. Instead, he left the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor with a chance of survival. It all started when Monk Daming persuaded the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor to convert to Buddhism. Because of that, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor trapped Monk Daming in the ancient coffin and etched the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra on its lid. Since you want me to become a Buddha, I'll turn you into a fiend. By doing that, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was actually still fighting Monk Daming. Chapter 1762 Terrifying Fiend Technique. Chapter 1762 Terrifying Fiend Technique. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor destroyed Monk Daming's body and trapped his essence spirit in the ancient coffin, even leaving behind a Mingwang prayer bead. Back when he gathered that information, Su Zimo could not understand. Why did the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor spend so much effort to set up such a trap? It was only when the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor recounted the situation of the battle 40,000 years ago that Su Zimo understood. Although the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor won, he was indignant. He wanted to fight Monk Daming. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor left a chance of survival on purpose. If Monk Daming wanted to leave alive, he would only have a chance if he cultivated the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. The titular disciple of the Buddhist monasteries, Monk Daming, who had the compassion to save the masses, fell into the Fiend Dao and cultivated a Fiend technique, becoming the Fiend he wanted to suppress in the past. The moment Monk Daming broke free, he had already lost. Actually, the fight between the two of them did not stop at all. Instead, it lasted for 40,000 years. Su Zimo sighed emotionally. Although Monk Daming lost, Su Zimo was still filled with admiration for him. 40,000 years of struggle. It was dark in that cramped ancient coffin. There was no sound, no life, and nothing but a lonely essence spirit. Su Zimo did not dare to imagine how Monk Daming managed to survive the past 40,000 years. Su Zimo believed that he had a strong will and an unshakable Dao heart. However, he believed that he would not be able to last 40,000 years if he was in the same position. You're truly amazing. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor looked at Monk Daming and lamented as well. Back then, I was truly worried that you would waste your time until your essence spirit withered and you died in the ancient coffin. Finally, Fufu. You finally escaped. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor could not help but laugh without concealing the joy and excitement in his heart. The fact that you're free means that I've won. Furthermore, you'll never be able to turn the tides this time round. Indeed, I lost after 40,000 years of fighting. Monk Daming looked at his hands. All these years, in order to increase my strength, I cultivated the Fiend technique and my hands have been stained with endless blood. I'm no longer worthy of the title of Daming. Su Zimo sighed internally. This was also the reason why Monk Daming gave him the complete Mingwang prayer beads after knowing his identity. Although Monk Daming broke free, he felt guilty and could not face his old friends. In fact, he even wore his long hair to cover his face. Monk Daming must have endured immense pain and suffering all these years. After a moment of silence, Monk Daming said, I've lost completely in the battle for the past 40,000 years. However, the battle between us is not over yet. I've returned this time round to make a final conclusion. Ha 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 ha. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor could not help but burst into laughter. Daming, don't harbor any hopes. You know very well that since you've cultivated the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, you'll never be able to defeat me. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's words seemed to have a deeper meaning. Why could one never win the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor after cultivating the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra? The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor said, Daming, I've just said that you're the only one worthy of being my opponent in this generation. If possible, I don't want to refine you into my third clone either. As long as you choose to submit to me today, I'm willing to share this world with you. From this day forth, you, Daming, can stand shoulder to shoulder with me in Tianhuang mainland. Your status will be above the emperors and you will rule over Tianhuang mainland with the 10,000 races under your feet. The emperors were shocked. Everyone could tell how much the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor valued Monk Daming. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor could even give up on condensing a third clone to give Monk Daming a chance to be on par with him. After Monk Daming appeared, there was no one else in the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's eyes. To be precise, in the eyes of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, everyone else, even Su Zimo, were his blood slaves. Only Monk Daming was qualified to be on par with him. Suddenly, a terrifying guess crossed Su Zimo's mind as he asked, Blood Fiend, why did you save me twice back in the 1,000-year Blood Sea and East Sea? In the 1,000-year Blood Sea, it was the clone of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, the Tao Wu Demon Emperor, that released the blood-colored bubbles to save Su Zimo. Above the East Sea, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor transformed into Hermit and saved him from the hands of the Golden Crow Patriarch. Hee hee. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor laughed. Desolate Marshal, haven't you realized yet? Even you will just merely be a blood slave of mine. Among the many blood slaves, you're the most outstanding and have the greatest potential. How can I bear to see you die? The emperors were alarmed and turned to look. Even the Martial Emperor would only be a blood slave of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. That information was way too terrifying. Monk Daming turned to Su Zimo. The reason why the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra is so powerful is not only because it can refine bloodlines limitlessly. More than that, it's because those who cultivate this fiend technique will not be able to break free from the control of Blood Fiend. Su Zimo had only cultivated a small portion of the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra on the ancient coffin. Therefore he could not see through the essence of the Fiend technique. However, after releasing the Fiend technique a few times, he could vaguely sense that there was something extremely terrifying behind it. Therefore, after the battle at the Thousand-Year Blood Sea, he did not release the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra no matter how dangerous it was. Su Zimo said in a deep voice, "In that case, the deeper you cultivate this Fiend technique, the harder it will be for you to break free." "That's right." Monk Daming nodded. "That's why I wanted to kill you on 6 Stars Mountain back then. It was because you cultivated this Fiend technique and were already considered his blood slave. I didn't want you to become stronger, that's why I wanted to kill you. However, even till the end you did not use the Fiend technique. That was why I did not kill you either." Monk Daming continued, "The Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra that the two of us cultivated was left behind by Blood Fiend, so it has the smallest flaws. However, he left a lot of flaws in the Fiend technique cultivated by the others. Therefore, when the same Fiend technique is released, it's difficult for the others to affect us." Suddenly Su Zimo was enlightened. He suddenly understood many things. It was no wonder why Monk Daming stopped Heavenly Secrets and Purple Flame from refining their bloodlines in the Battle of Heaven and Earth Valley. Du's blood tribute could not affect Monk Daming either. On the contrary, Monk Daming could refine it with ease. Simply put, although they were all cultivating the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, the two of them cultivated a more complete and top-tier Fiend technique. The others were using an inferior version. "That's right." The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor looked at Su Zimo and said proudly, "Desolate Marshal, from now on, you'll be the highest level blood slave under me. You will only be beneath me in Daming." By saying that, it was as though the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor had bestowed a great gift upon Su Zimo. Chapter 1763 Blood Fiend's Miscalculation. Chapter 1763, Blood Fiend's Miscalculation. "Blood Fiend, aren't you way too confident?" Su Zimo sneered, "I've only cultivated a few sections of your Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and released it a few times. Do you think you can control me with that? Additionally, even if you can control it, you'll only be able to control my Dragon Phoenix true body at most. This Green Lotus true body of mine was created by the creation Green Lotus and has nothing to do with the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra." After reconstructing his Green Lotus true body, Su Zimo had never released the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. The one who truly released the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra was his original body, the current Dragon Phoenix true body. Fufufu. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor grinned and shook his head. "Desolate Marshal, you're way too naive. Do you think that the Fiend technique I created is only related to my body and bloodline? As long as you cultivate it, this Fiend technique will haunt you forever, including your essence spirit." Before his sentence was finished, his eyes lit up with a strange blood glint. "Ugh." Su Zimo grunted dully and his expression changed. Blood-colored chains appeared on the Dragon Phoenix true body and coiled around his body tightly. No matter how the Dragon Phoenix true body channeled his blood chi, he could not take on the form of a taboo and break free from the scarlet chain. In the consciousness of the Green Lotus true body, blood-colored threads appeared on the black-haired essence spirit on the Creation Lotus platform as well. The blood-colored threads emitted an extremely evil power and were extremely sharp, gripping the Green Lotus essence spirit tightly. Su Zimo's expression turned extremely terrible. To think that this Fiend technique would be so terrifying. Even though his essence spirit was split into two and he cultivated two true bodies, he could not break free from the influence of this Fiend technique. Although the Green Lotus true body was reconstructed without any impurities and had nothing to do with the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, his Green Lotus essence spirit was already tainted by that evil power when he cultivated and released the Fiend technique. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor surveyed his surroundings and looked at the other emperors proudly. "Why aren't you guys submitting? Even your Martial Emperor is only my blood slave right now." Many emperors had pale expressions of despair. Even the storyteller's eyes dimmed. Their only hope was the Martial Emperor. But now that the Martial Emperor was under the control of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, no one in Tianhuang mainland could match him. "Are you still struggling?" The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor looked at Su Zimo's two true bodies and said coldly, "Kneel." The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's eyes shone with a scarlet glint. The blood-colored chains on the Dragon Phoenix true body tightened. They emitted an extremely strange power and began to absorb the bloodline of the Dragon Phoenix true body to refine it. A powerful will descended in the consciousness of the Dragon Phoenix true body. Under the envelopment of that will, the Dragon Phoenix essence spirit felt a tremendous pressure and its consciousness turned blurry. Roar! The Dragon Phoenix true body growled. Scarlet dragon scales appeared on his body one after another, burning with raging flames as he fought against the blood-colored chains. The two different forces devoured one another mutually. At the same time, the essence spirit of the Dragon Phoenix true body fought against the will and refused to back down. The Green Lotus true body was in the same situation. An extremely powerful will wanted to suppress the Green Lotus essence spirit and control it. Green rays of light burst forth from the 72 lotus holes of the creation lotus platform and surrounded the Green Lotus essence spirit, resisting the will. A voice seemed to echo in the hearts of his two true bodies, telling him to give up on resisting. Su Zimo was unmoved and tried his best to maintain his clarity to fight against that power. Although the two true bodies did not submit to the will of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, they trembled and endured immense pain. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor frowned and his expression darkened. He had not expected Su Zimo's will to be so strong that it could form a stalemate with him. When Monk Daming saw that, he smiled gently. Blood Fiend, you miscalculated. Even if you schemed for 40,000 years and racked your brains, you did not expect that the martial emperor would be able to enter a stalemate with you because of his lack of fiendish tendencies and strong Dao heart. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor sneered indifferently, this is nothing. The current situation is still under my control. Although I haven't controlled Desolate Marshal completely, his two true bodies can't even fend for themselves right now and have no combat strength. I can destroy him at any moment. Everyone could tell that the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was not lying. Right now, Su Zimo's two true bodies were restrained by the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. Although they did not fall completely, it was extremely difficult for them to resist. Notwithstanding the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, any emperor would be able to kill Su Zimo with ease. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor looked at Monk Daming and continued, it's not impossible if I want to control Desolate Marshal completely. As long as I refine you and perfect my fiend technique, I'll be able to control him with ease. Monk Daming shook his head. Wrong again. This is your second miscalculation. I've already said that the fight between us is not over. The reason why I'm back is to end it with you. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor sneered, Daming, you're different from Desolate Marshal. Over the years you've been deeply fiendish. You know very well how many bloodlines you refined in this battle of the 10,000 races. If I want to refine you into my third clone, you won't be able to resist at all. Monk Daming said, Blood Fiend, do you know why I cultivated the fiend technique and came out of the ancient coffin? The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor frowned slightly. I didn't do it because I wanted to survive. Monk Daming continued, I cultivated this fiend technique and broke free because I wanted to think of a way to dispel your fiend technique. Nothing is absolute. Everything in the world has its counter. Even the most perfect cultivation techniques have flaws. If you can create the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, I'll definitely be able to dispel it. You. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's heart skipped a beat as he opened his eyes and channeled his fiend technique, wanting to try and control Monk Daming. Beams of blood chi burst forth from Monk Daming's body. It was as though an evil fiend had awakened within Monk Daming's body. Suddenly, Monk Daming flicked his finger and smiled with a benevolent gaze. A divine and flawless halo appeared behind his head. A powerful Buddhist will descended and suppressed the ferocious fiend in his body. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's expression darkened completely. He had failed. Monk Daming was completely out of his control. Although Su Zimo was resisting the control of the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and could not move, he could still sense the situation outside. He finally understood why Monk Daming wanted to collect many cultivation techniques and secret skills over the years. Monk Daming even took the risk to head to Enigma Palace and steal the Mystic Firmament record. That was because he wanted to find a way to dispel the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra using those cultivation techniques. And now he had succeeded. That was the reason why he shaved his long hair and became Monk Daming once more. Monk Daming did not lose. Chapter 1764, Appearance of the Prime Body. Chapter 1764, Appearance of the Prime Body. Fufufu. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's expression changed and he suddenly laughed. Initially he merely chuckled. In the end he reared his head in laughter. Ha 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 ha. His laughter was loud and filled with a powerful will that was deafening and spread in all directions. Under normal circumstances, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor should have been dealt a huge blow given that the third clone he had painstakingly cultivated was completely out of his control. Furthermore, this also meant that the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor had lost to Monk Daming this time round. This should be even more unacceptable for the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. However, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor laughed instead of getting angry, as though he was indifferent to everything. Blood chi filled his body and his aura was torrential. Daming, it doesn't matter even if I miscalculated twice. I'll repeat it again, the situation is still under my control. Although you've dispelled the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, you haven't won against me either. As long as I suppress you, I can still assimilate you completely with my Fiend technique. In the end you still can't beat me. Monk Daming shook his head gently. It won't be so easy to suppress me. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor said proudly, I know your strength the best. Even if you've absorbed and refined endless bloodlines in the battle of the 10,000 races this time round, a single clone of mine is enough to suppress you completely. Monk Daming smiled. Blood Fiend, this is your third miscalculation. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor narrowed his eyes slightly. Monk Daming said indifferently, there's someone you missed out. Impossible. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor said resolutely, I've planned for 40,000 years and all the paragons and monster incarnates born in Tianhuang mainland are within my sights without exception. Monk Daming turned around and said to the void, I can only deal with one of the Blood Fiend's clones. I'll leave Blood Fiend's prime body and his other clone to you. It was clear that Monk Daming was talking to someone. However, the void was empty. The emperors could not see anyone either. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor narrowed his eyes that shone with a blood glint. He released his spirit consciousness and enveloped the void, sealing it completely. Nobody? A puzzled look flashed through the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's eyes. Given his understanding of Monk Daming, the latter would definitely not do something so mystifying. However, who in Tianhuang mainland could hide from his senses? Suddenly, a commotion broke out in the void and the entire space rippled like a lake. A person walked out slowly from the void ripples. The person wore purple robes that draped over his shoulders. His face was shrouded by a layer of fog and his face was blurry. Instantly, countless gazes landed on the purple-robed man. Who is that? What's his cultivation realm? Many emperors were puzzled. Back then, the martial Dao Prime Body had only snatched the cultivation techniques and secret skills of Heavenly Dipper Sect, Malevolent Earth Sect and Penglai Island at the 10,000 race meet. None of the emperors present had seen him before. What surprised the emperors the most was that not only could they not see through the fog on this person's face, they could not even detect his cultivation realm. Everything about this person was a mystery. The storyteller divined in secret. Before long, the storyteller shuddered. He could not divine anything at all. Back then, even when he divined Su Zimo, he could still see some of the latter's background. However, it failed halfway. However, this person was completely untraceable. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's expression darkened as well. That was because even he could not tell the purple-robed man's background and cultivation. However, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was not worried. The world of Tianhuang mainland was already perfected with complete heaven and earth laws. There was no way this person was an expert of the upper world. Since this was someone from the lower world, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor believed that he would be able to suppress him with his capabilities. Who are you? The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor narrowed his eyes and asked coldly. Before the martial Dao Prime Body could reply, Monk Daming smiled gently. Blood Fiend, I've just told you earlier that you've underestimated the Martial Emperor. Desolate Martial? The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor frowned. What has that person got to do with Desolate Martial? The martial Dao Prime Body was surprised and glanced sideways at Monk Daming, asking with a smile, when did you know? In the ancient battlefield. Monk Daming said, back then, after you and I became emperors and killed Du and the Corpse Emperor, I mentioned your existence to your Green Lotus True Body. Although your Green Lotus True Body was a little surprised, he was still too calm without any bit of curiosity. At that time I guessed it. The martial Dao prime body could not help but praise internally. Monk Daming was indeed the smartest and most talented cultivator he had ever encountered. The fact that he was able to dispel the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra was proof of how strong and talented he was. Since Monk Daming exposed him, there was no need for the martial Dao prime body to hide. The fog on his face gradually dispersed, revealing his true appearance. Initially, the emperors were confused when they heard the conversation between the martial Dao prime body and Monk Daming. However, when the martial Dao prime body revealed his true appearance, it caused an uproar. How is that possible? Martial Emperor? The emperors widened their eyes in disbelief. The storyteller opened his mouth slightly as well and looked back and forth between the Dragon Phoenix true body, Green Lotus true body and the martial Dao prime body. Could this be the martial emperor's third true body? It was no wonder why the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was a formidable figure. After his shock, he regained his composure and looked at the martial Dao prime body coldly. Interesting. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor smiled. To think that your clone could hide so well that even I was fooled. He channeled his fiend technique secretly and his eyes shone with a blood glint, wanting to try and control the martial Dao prime body. There's no need to try. The martial Dao prime body could tell the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's intentions and said indifferently, "Your fiend technique is useless against me." The birth of the martial Dao prime body was a variable to begin with. This true body was formed from the martial Dao Fruit and gathered the will of the martial Dao, the faith of all living beings and many other powers. There were no traces of the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. Good. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor nodded repeatedly. To think that after plotting for 40,000 years, a variable still appeared. However, it doesn't matter. I want to see who in Tianhuang mainland can defend against my attacks. Kill? Blood chi surged from the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, Tao Wu Demon Emperor and Astral Immortal Emperor as they revealed menacing blood faces, roaring in all directions. The battle broke out instantly. The storyteller, Long Ran and the others looked for the Blood Slave Emperors who had already submitted to the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor right away. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor and his two clones could only be left to the martial Dao prime body and Monk Daming. Even Night Spirit could not interfere in a battle of this level. Chapter 1765, Astral Swap. Chapter 1765, Astral Swap. Monk Daming's figure flashed and he charged towards the Astral Immortal Emperor. Given his combat strength, it was already his limit to be able to hold back a clone of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. He had cultivated for way too short a time. It had only been slightly more than 1,000 years since he was truly reborn and had broken out of seclusion. Both of them used the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra as a foundation. No matter how talented he was, it was difficult to make up for the 10,000 years of accumulation. The astral tribulation happened 20,000 years ago. Among the two clones of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, the Astral Immortal Emperor had cultivated for a shorter time. That was the reason why Monk Daming targeted the Astral Immortal Emperor directly. The martial Dao prime body strode towards the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. Although it seemed slow, he arrived in the blink of an eye. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor had a cold expression and glared at the martial Dao prime body fixedly. Both of them attacked at the same time. The martial Dao prime body clenched his fists and his blood chi surged, as though a gigantic furnace was burning with immense power. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's blood chi spread and he was drenched in blood. He punched out as well. That punch seemed to have formed a sea of blood that drowned the martial Dao prime body. Boom. The fists collided with a loud bang. Heaven and earth rumbled. In that instant the entire battlefield seemed to have paused for a moment and time stopped. This was not only a collision of their strength, but also a fight between fire and water. The punch of the martial Dao prime body was like a volcano that erupted with a terrifying scorching power. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's punch surged like a tide and created waves of blood. The clash between the two of them was evenly matched. Neither of them retreated at all. Actually, the combat strength of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor far surpassed his two clones and was beyond the understanding of ordinary cultivators. It was not something that could be matched after one comprehended a few supreme divine powers. Due to the existence of the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor could refine bloodlines to temper his flesh and essence spirit continuously. In other words, there was almost no limit to the power of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. One could imagine how strong the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was after 40,000 years of cultivation. It was no exaggeration to say that even if the storyteller and the other emperors released supreme divine powers, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor could shatter them with a casual slap. The combat strength of the martial Dao Prime Body could not be judged using common sense either. The martial Dao Prime Body smelted 100 sutras and all dermic arts. There was no limit to his strength. Furthermore, the martial Dao Prime Body had opened up a new cultivation Dao technique and created the Fate Ring secret ground. It could be said that the martial Dao Prime Body and Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor had already cultivated to the peak of the power of the lower world and were extremely close to experts like the Black Immortals of the upper world. The greatest difference between them and the Black Immortals of the upper world was that they had not undergone tribulation transcendence and did not have heaven and earth essence chi in their bodies. That single punch truly shocked the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. He had truly not expected that there would be someone in Tianhuang mainland who could defend against his power. What was even more terrifying was that he could sense an extremely terrifying aura from the martial Dao Prime Body, as though it wanted to incinerate everything. In fact, it might even incinerate him. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor felt threatened. However, he did not let his Tao Wu Demon Emperor clone join him in the battle against the martial Emperor Prime Body. That was because the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor realized that even if he joined forces with the Tao Wu Demon Emperor, he might not be able to suppress the martial Dao Prime Body. However, if the Tao Wu Demon Emperor joined forces with the Astral Immortal Emperor, they would be able to suppress Monk Daming in a short period of time. That way he could conveniently condense a third clone after subduing Monk Daming. At that time, when he attained greater mastery of the Fiend technique and his combat strength increased exponentially, he would definitely be able to kill the martial Dao Prime Body. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor willed with a single thought. The Tao Wu Demon Emperor, who was initially charging towards the martial Emperor Prime Body, suddenly turned around and charged towards Monk Daming. Although the martial Dao Prime Body's back was facing the Tao Wu Demon Emperor, he sensed this and retreated. Instantly, he arrived behind the latter and grabbed his gigantic head. Sensing danger, the Tao Wu Demon Emperor turned his head hurriedly to dodge. However, the martial Dao Prime Body attacked extremely quickly and descended instantly, slapping the shoulder of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor. The martial Dao Prime Body exerted strength in all 5 fingers and they were as sharp as sabers. They pierced the flesh of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor and blood flashed. The martial Dao Prime Body raised his arm and grabbed the shoulder of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor, smashing the latter forward. Boom! A deafening bang that shook the heavens and earth sounded. The massive body of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor was flung to the ground heavily by the martial Dao Prime Body, creating a gigantic pit. It was an extremely shocking sight. It was as though a tiny mayfly had uprooted a towering ancient tree and smashed it onto the ground. It was an absolute suppression in terms of strength. The Tao Wu Demon Emperor's tendons and bones felt like they were about to split and the pain was unbearable. In the blink of an eye, his body that was initially thousands of feet tall returned to its normal height of a human. Although the Tao Wu Demon Emperor was massive with a terrifying aura and ferocious strength, he was way too clumsy and could not dodge the attack of the martial Dao Prime Body. The Tao Wu Demon Emperor could only shrink his body. Right then, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor charged forward once more and swung the slender fishing rod in his hands towards the martial Dao Prime Body. Swoosh! A white light that was incomparably stunning flashed like lightning in the night skies. The skin on the fishing rod shattered silently, revealing a cold glint within. How was that a fishing rod? It was a sharp, thin saber. At the same time, on another battlefield, Monk Daming exchanged blows consecutively with the Astral Immortal Emperor in melee combat. However, he retreated repeatedly and his organs vibrated as his blood chi surged. He was completely disadvantaged. Monk Daming's physique was strong and his blood chi was terrifying. Back then he could even fight the martial Dao Prime Body in melee combat. But now he was completely suppressed by the Astral Immortal Emperor. The Astral Immortal Emperor had cultivated for too long and was at least 20,000 years older than Monk Daming. In terms of melee combat techniques, the Astral Immortal Emperor was not disadvantaged at all. If this continued, Monk Daming would be beaten to death by the Astral Immortal Emperor in melee combat. Monk Daming retreated continuously and suddenly bit his finger, spilling his blood as an emperor. He channeled his essence spirit and his gaze intensified, revealing a cold killing intent. Waving his blood-stained finger, he wrote a blood-colored word rapidly in front of him. Kill. It was the supreme divine power of the eternal human emperor, the killing word art. A terrifying divine power spread. The word kill was formed instantly and possessed an extremely terrifying killing power. It charged towards the astral immortal emperor, wanting to kill him. Fu. The astral immortal emperor sneered and channeled his essence spirit as well. He extended his arm and pointed at the incoming killing word art, shouting softly, "Astral swap." This was also a supreme divine power, astral swap. After that divine power was released, a strange divine power enveloped the killing word art. Suddenly, the astral immortal emperor turned and pointed at the martial Dao prime body in another battlefield. The killing word art changed directions and charged towards the martial Dao prime body. Chapter 1766, Domineering and Invincible. Chapter 1766, Domineering and Invincible. Astral swap was a supreme divine power. Although it did not have a powerful killing power, it was not to be underestimated. The killing word art was one of the supreme divine powers with the most terrifying killing power. However, its target was shifted by astral swap. The killing word art did not pose any threat to the astral immortal emperor. Instead, it charged towards the martial Dao prime body. At the same time, the saber in the hands of the blood refinement fiend emperor transformed into a white streak of light and descended. The shrunken Tao Wu demon emperor was filled with demonic qi and the stench of blood as he lunged towards the martial Dao prime body as well. The tides had turned entirely. At that moment, it was equivalent to the blood refinement fiend emperor joining forces with his two clones to launch a ferocious attack on the martial Dao prime body. It was 1 against 3. The martial Dao prime body took a deep breath and his gaze intensified. Without even looking at the killing word art that was charging from behind, he punched in reverse. At the same time, he exhaled a stream of white qi. The white qi emitted an extremely sharp intent with a chilling killing intent. In midair, it condensed two divine beasts, the divine dragon and soaring serpent, and charged towards the Tao Wu demon emperor. The white qi spat out by the martial Dao prime body was no ordinary sword qi. It was the sword qi condensed by the earth-slaying sword art. At the same time, the martial Dao prime body extended his fist and punched towards the saber. Clang. The sound of metal clashing echoed when the saber struck the fist of the martial Dao prime body. The fist of the martial Dao prime body was intact. The blood refinement fiend emperor's heart skipped a beat. The flesh of the martial Dao prime body was tempered with the martial spirit fire all year round and was like a gigantic furnace that smelted all dermic arts and was indestructible. The body of the martial Dao prime body could suppress all dermic treasures in Tianhuang mainland. Even the human emperor's seal could not injure the martial Dao prime body at all. Before the blood refinement fiend emperor could retract his saber, the martial Dao prime body suddenly changed tactics. His entire arm suddenly went limp and wrapped around the saber like a divine elephant's trunk. Piak. The arms of the martial Dao prime body coiled, trembled and yanked. The blood refinement fiend emperor shuddered. He felt a terrifying power of distortion, vibration and tearing burst forth from his palm through the saber in his hands. The blood refinement fiend emperor's palm was torn instantly and fresh blood dripped. Unable to hold on, his saber flew out of his hands. The blood refinement fiend emperor's saber was indeed a high-quality dermic treasure. If it was an ordinary dermic treasure, it would have been turned into scrap metal by the martial Dao prime body's sweep and destroyed completely. The saber fell. On the other side, the killing word art collided with the fist of the martial Dao prime body. The incomparably sharp divine power tore at the arm and fist of the martial Dao prime body continuously, wanting to slice his flesh. However, the martial Dao prime body was unmoved. His blood qi burst forth and shattered the killing word art with a single punch, dissipating it. The Tao Wu demon emperor released his innate divine powers and tore apart the divine dragon and soaring serpent conjured by the earth-slaying sword qi before long, glaring at the martial Dao prime body murderously. The martial Dao prime body resolved the attacks of the three of them single-handedly. Of course, the martial Dao prime body did not dare to be careless either. In fact, he did not even dare to reveal his trump cards casually. That was because the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor definitely had a powerful trump card. On the other side, Monk Daming released his supreme divine power once more and fought against the Astral Immortal Emperor. Kill? The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor carried a rich blood chi and lunged towards the martial Dao Prime body, saying coldly, "I don't believe that my 40,000 years of cultivation can't compare to a junior like you who's only more than 1,000 years old." The Tao Wu Demon Emperor attacked at the same time. The martial Dao Prime body was fearless and strode forward with a deep gaze, punching towards the two emperors. Boom. It was as though a volcano had erupted within the body of the martial Dao Prime body. That punch was as violent as fire and released a suffocating power. Bang, bang, bang. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor and the Tao Wu Demon Emperor exchanged blows consecutively with the martial Dao Prime body in melee combat. It was a clash of strength without any technique. After a series of head-on collisions, energy was released wildly and blood chi devoured one another. The martial Dao Prime body stood in midair with his black hair dancing and a burning gaze. He was not disadvantaged against two people. The void in the battlefield of the three of them was torn apart and riddled with holes. The three of them had almost left the world of Tianhuang mainland and were in the wild currents of the void. Their figures were faintly visible through the shattered void. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's 40,000 years of cultivation was indeed terrifying. After so many years of refining bloodlines, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's body and blood chi had already reached an unimaginable level. The power released by a casual punch from the martial Dao Prime body was enough to shatter a dermic treasure. However, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor could fight the martial Dao Prime body head-on in melee combat. The two of them attacked faster and fiercer. In the blink of an eye, they had already exchanged 1,000 blows. This was not only a fight of strength, but also a fight of blood chi and stamina. Both of them had expended a lot of energy in that clash. With 40,000 years of cultivation as a foundation, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's bloodline naturally surged and his stamina was strong. As for the martial Dao Prime body, he cultivated the martial Dao and tempered his body all year round with the martial spirit fire. His body was like a gigantic furnace with raging flames that burned brighter and brighter. Both of them could guarantee that they would be fine after exchanging 1,000 blows. However, the Tao Wu Demon Emperor at the side merely received a punch from the martial Emperor Prime body every now and then. Even so, he was already pale by now with his flesh split apart, drenched in blood. During this period of time, his body was shattered countless times by the power of the martial Dao Prime body and reconstructed. However, the battle between the three of them showed no signs of stopping. Kill? The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor roared and his blood chi surged, spewing out and transforming into a gigantic menacing blood face behind him that devoured towards the martial Dao Prime body. Bloodline Phenomenon. The blood face phenomenon was conjured by the Tao Wu Demon Emperor at the same time. Two blood faces descended with an extremely evil aura. Burn it. The martial Dao Prime body channeled his blood chi at the same time and seemed to have vanished. In his place was a gigantic furnace that burned with raging flames, turning it red and almost transparent. The blood faces collided with the martial Dao furnace and let out an ear-piercing scream. The three bloodline phenomenons collided. Initially it was difficult to determine the victor. However, after half an hour, the two blood faces could not withstand the heat of the martial Dao furnace and gradually withered, defeated. Battle. The martial Dao Prime body revealed himself and hollered. His aura intensified and he attacked once more, enveloping the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor and the Tao Wu Demon Emperor. The martial Dao Prime body fought fiercer. The martial Dao was about advancing courageously. In such a fight, the will of the martial Dao was tempered to an even stronger level. The power of the martial Dao Prime body rose continuously as well. The difference between them was clear. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was gradually disadvantaged and defended more with less counterattacks. It was even more so for the Tao Wu Demon Emperor who was forced to retreat in defeat. The martial Dao Prime body fought 1 against 2 and was domineering and invincible. His aura was torrential as he looked down like an emperor and suppressed the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor and the Tao Wu Demon Emperor completely. Chapter 1767, Blood Net. Chapter 1767, Blood Net. The fight between the other emperors did not pose much of a threat to the emperors of the human race. After all, Night Spirit had comprehended two supreme divine powers and was almost invincible among the emperors. However, the outcome of the situation here could not change the bigger picture. The only way Tianhuang mainland could escape this catastrophe was by killing the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor completely. The emperors were not directly involved and could clearly see that although the martial Dao Prime Body was suppressing the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor and the Tao Wu Demon Emperor, it was 1 against 2. It was still impossible if he wanted to suppress the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor directly within a short period of time. On the other side, the outcome of the fight between Monk Daming and the Astral Immortal Emperor was about to be decided. Monk Daming's cultivation time was still too short. Although Monk Daming had dispelled the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and possessed many profoundness of the Buddhist monasteries, it was still difficult to make up for the difference after tens of thousands of years of accumulation. In terms of strength and divine powers, Monk Daming was disadvantaged. Up till this point of the battle, Monk Daming was already covered in injuries and looked wretched, having expended a lot of blood qi. However, the Astral Immortal Emperor was in a much better state. His clothes fluttered and every single move he made still exuded a carefree aura. The difference between them was clear. The storyteller was worried. If Monk Daming was suppressed by the Astral Immortal Emperor, it would mean that the martial Dao Prime Body would have to fight 1 against 3. What was even more serious was that there was a high chance the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor could refine his third clone once Monk Daming was suppressed. At that time, even the martial Dao Prime Body would not be a match for the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's perfected fiend technique. Right then, another change happened on the two most critical battlefields. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was suppressed by the martial Dao Prime Body and the blood glint in his eyes surged. He could no longer hold it in. It was even worse on the side of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor as he was drenched in blood. Absorb. Suddenly, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor took out a fishnet from his storage bag and bit the tip of his tongue. He spat out a mouthful of essence blood and splashed it on the fishnet. Buzz. The fishnet shone with a blood light and turned blood-colored in the blink of an eye, emitting an extremely evil aura. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor waved his hand. The blood-colored fishnet enveloped the martial Dao Prime Body. The martial Dao Prime Body frowned slightly and dodged to the side in a flash. Through his spirit perception, the martial Dao Prime Body could sense that the blood-colored fishnet was not easy to deal with. However, no matter how the martial Dao Prime Body dodged, he could not break free from the envelopment of the fishnet. The martial Dao Prime Body dodged repeatedly. Not only did he fail to break free from the blood-colored fishnet, he got closer to it instead. Umph. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor sneered, I refined this blood net using a secret skill of the upper world for 40,000 years. Even if you can fly or burrow underground, you won't be able to escape. Right after he said that, the blood-colored fishnet descended and enveloped the martial Dao Prime Body. The moment the blood-colored fishnet made contact with the martial Dao Prime Body, it stuck close and constricted continuously. Break. The blood qi of the martial Dao Prime Body surged and his body expanded. His flesh swelled and he wanted to burst forth with the power in his body to break the blood-colored fishnet. However, the blood-colored fishnet expanded alongside his body. His power was useless against the blood-colored fishnet. The fishnet was soft to begin with. The power of the martial Dao Prime Body was the most ferocious and was countered by the fishnet. Although the burst power of the martial Dao Prime Body was ferocious, the fishnet spread in all directions and dissipated it. Not only that, when the blood-colored fishnet approached the flesh of the martial Dao Prime Body, it began to emit an evil blood qi that seeped into the latter's body through his purple robes. The martial Dao Prime Body frowned slightly. This blood-colored fishnet was indeed terrifying. If he could not break free from the fishnet, he would easily be assimilated and devoured, let alone kill the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. The situation changed once more. In the blink of an eye, the martial Dao Prime Body was in a passive position. On the other side, Monk Daming looked a little dispirited, but he had no intention of retreating. His gaze was still benevolent as he looked at the Astral Immortal Emperor not far away. He clasped his palms together and closed his eyes, chanting Sanskrit. Suddenly, one after another, tall and sacred Buddhas appeared around the Astral Immortal Emperor, shining brightly with unparalleled might. Every single Buddha chanted Buddhist sutras that reverberated through the world. Shadows of divine dragons and elephants gradually appeared around the gigantic Buddhas. The divine dragons roared and the divine elephants trumpeted. It was the strongest supreme divine power of the Buddhist monasteries, Buddha Dragon Elephant. Buddha Dragon Elephant could only be comprehended if one had the deepest comprehension of Buddhism and was fused with many profoundness of the Buddhist monasteries. Even the Green Lotus true body had not comprehended that supreme divine power. Monk Daming was the only one in Tianhuang mainland who could do it. Buddha Dragon Elephant descended and a terrifying power suppressed the Astral Immortal Emperor. Starfall. With a grim expression, the Astral Immortal Emperor did not dare to be careless and hurriedly released his supreme divine power as well. Instantly the world shook. Countless stars in the firmament streaked with terrifying auras and flames descended towards Tianhuang mainland. However, with the protection of the Buddhist lights and dragon elephants, those stars could not shake the power of the Buddhas. Hell Blood Shield. The expression of the Astral Immortal Emperor changed starkly as he realized that a single supreme divine power could not shake Buddha Dragon Elephant. Immediately he released a second supreme divine power. The moment Buddha Dragon Elephant appeared, the Astral Immortal Emperor wanted to release two supreme divine powers in succession to defend. Boom, boom, boom. The power of the Buddhas collided with the stars. Countless Sanskrit sounds suppressed the Astral Immortal Emperor. Endless divine Buddhist lights descended, wanting to purify the Astral Immortal Emperor. However, the Astral Immortal Emperor reacted extremely quickly and conjured a shimmering blood-colored shield above his head that covered the skies and hid him behind it. Countless Sanskrit and Buddhist lights landed on the Hell Blood Shield and created ripples. The Astral Immortal Emperor's face was a little pale. This was the first time he felt threatened by Monk Daming. Thankfully, his cultivation was extremely deep and he managed to defend against Buddha Dragon Elephant with two supreme divine powers. Since he managed to defend against it, it was time for Monk Daming to die. On another battlefield. When the martial Dao Prime body sensed that, he was invigorated as well. The martial spirit fire in his body burned furiously and he seemed to have transformed into a gigantic furnace, wanting to burn the blood-colored fishnet to ashes. Buzz, buzz. However, the blood-colored fishnet emitted streams of blood chi that resisted the martial Dao furnace. The martial Dao furnace could not incinerate it instantly. When the blood refinement Fiend Emperor saw that, he frowned slightly and felt uneasy. I can't delay any longer. I have to resolve everything as soon as possible. The blood refinement Fiend Emperor's eyes shone with a blood glint. Blood-boiling spear. Almost at the same time, the blood refinement Fiend Emperor and the Tao Wu Demon Emperor channeled their essence spirits and condensed supreme divine powers. A bloodied spear was condensed in the palms of the two emperors. Their bloodlines surged and steam billowed as they threw it towards the martial Dao Prime body. Chapter 1768 Blood Face Mask. Chapter 1768 Blood Face Mask. The blood net shrank continuously and blood chi spread, restricting the movements of the martial Dao Prime body. If it was just two supreme divine powers, they would not be a threat to the martial Dao Prime body. However, in the blood net, the power of the martial Dao Prime body could not be released at all. His body was drenched in blood and his strength was greatly suppressed. Two spears made of fresh blood tore through the air with a scorching aura. Those two supreme divine powers could not kill the martial Dao Prime body yet. However, if he could not break free from the blood net, the martial Dao Prime body would be equivalent to a live target. The blood refinement Fiend Emperor and the Tao Wu Demon Emperor would attack continuously and release ferocious attacks. The body of the martial Dao Prime body might not be able to withstand it either. At that thought, the martial Dao Prime body channeled his essence spirit and an incomparably scorching divine power surged from his body. Suddenly, scarlet flames burst forth from his body. The blood refinement Fiend Emperor narrowed his gaze and his heart skipped a beat. The scarlet flames made his heart skip a beat. Incinerating firmament boiling sea. Dragon Phoenix flame? Something's not right. The blood refinement Fiend Emperor denied internally that the flames were definitely not the two above. This was a divine power that he had never seen before. In the blink of an eye, the two blood-boiling spears arrived before the martial Dao Prime body. However, when the two supreme divine powers collided with the flames of the martial Dao Prime body, they were burned by the flames instantly like snow meeting a blazing sun. The two supreme divine powers could not injure the martial Dao Prime body at all. The martial Dao Prime body burned with flames, but his gaze was cold as he glared at the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor not far away. A crystalline lotus flower that shone with a red glow gradually formed in his palm. It burned with flames and spun slowly. The blood light on the fishnet began to dim. The entire fishnet crackled from the heat and twisted wildly as its aura weakened continuously. After the flaming red lotus was formed, the blood-colored fishnet could no longer hold on and a gigantic hole was burned out. The dermic treasure that the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor had nurtured for 40,000 years was completely destroyed and fell from the martial Dao Prime body. Ah! When the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor saw that, his eyes widened and he was enraged. He wanted to attack and retrieve the broken fishnet. Right then, a voice sounded in the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's mind. "Don't go. It's a karmic flame." The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was slightly stunned. "That's the Red Lotus karmic fire. Retreat first." The voice in the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's mind turned grim. Right then, the martial Dao Prime body threw the Red Lotus karmic fire in his hands towards the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. The Red Lotus karmic fire transformed into a streak of light and arrived instantly. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor hated the Red Lotus immensely and condensed another supreme divine power, the Blood Fiend Palm, to grab the Red Lotus karmic fire. "Don't touch it." The voice in the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's mind sounded once more, but it was too late. A gigantic blood-colored palm grabbed the karmic flame. Instead of injuring the karmic flame, the blood-colored palm was burned into 1,000 holes. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's pupils constricted. Realizing how powerful it was, he retreated and wanted to avoid the Red Lotus karmic fire. However, the karmic flame burned the blood-colored palm and extended along the supreme divine power. A wisp of the karmic flame landed on the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. Negative karma exists because of the cycle of karma. The karmic flame was like a catalyst. Although it was only a small flame, it ignited the negative karma on the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor instantly. Instantly, raging flames burned on the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's body. For the past 40,000 years, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor schemed against the 10,000 races and planned 4 catastrophes single-handedly. His hands were tainted with the blood of countless living beings. Those were all negative karma. The deeper the negative karma, the more terrifying the lethality of the karmic flame. In the blink of an eye, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was burned into a gigantic fireball that engulfed his body completely. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's tragic cry sounded from the fireball in extreme pain. The Red Lotus karmic fire struck the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor heavily and almost penetrated his body. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor spat out a mouthful of blood that was burned to ashes by the karmic flame before it could spill. At the side, the Tao Wu Demon Emperor was horrified and hid at the side hurriedly, not daring to advance. Before long, the tragic cries from the gigantic fireball stopped. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor is dead. The emperors were invigorated. If the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was dead, given the combat strength of the martial Dao Prime body, even the 2 clones of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor and the Astral Immortal Emperor would not be his match. The martial Dao Prime body frowned slightly. Only he knew that the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was not dead. If the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor died, the Dragon Phoenix True Body and Green Lotus True Body would break free from the restraints of the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. Right now, the 2 true bodies were still defending against the power of the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and could barely fend for themselves. The gigantic light of the karmic flame gradually shrank and dimmed. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's figure reappeared. He looked extremely wretched. His flesh was split open by the karmic flame and his flesh was mangled. However, his body was still filled with a powerful life force. Furthermore, that aura was rising rapidly. The gaze of the martial Dao Prime body focused. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor wore a blood face mask. The blood face mask was filled with a powerful fiend chi that surged into the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's body continuously, repairing his body. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's injuries healed at a visible speed. This blood face mask was the one that suppressed the karmic flame of the martial Dao Prime body. Desolate Marshal, you sure are full of surprises. Through the mask, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's voice was filled with deep hatred as he said coldly, "Let's see what else you have." Before his sentence was finished, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor released a torrential blood chi and charged towards the martial Dao Prime Body. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor punched out. The martial Dao Prime Body punched forward as well. Boom. There was a loud bang. The martial Dao Prime Body shuddered and crackling sounds came from his body, as though his bones were about to fall apart. Thud, thud, thud. The martial Dao Prime Body could not defend against the punch of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor and retreated 3 steps in succession. The martial Dao Prime Body's heart skipped a beat. After wearing the blood face mask, the power of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor had actually risen to an extremely terrifying level where the martial Dao Prime Body was almost severely injured. Not only that, the blood chi in the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's body seemed to be sentient and extended along the fist of the martial Dao Prime Body towards his arm. In the blink of an eye, the palm of the martial Dao Prime Body was filled with blood threads. Splash! Splash! The blood threads contained an extremely evil power that corroded the flesh of the martial Dao Prime Body, causing green smoke to billow. The martial Dao Prime Body had a grim expression. It was clear that the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was making use of another power. Fiend Chi surged endlessly from the blood face mask, and with the augmentation of that power, the combat strength of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor increased exponentially. Chapter 1769 Heavenly Fiend Dissolution. Chapter 1769 Heavenly Fiend Dissolution. Boom, boom, boom. 3 loud bangs sounded from the body of the martial Dao Prime Body, as though he had broken free from some shackles and opened some secret ground. 3 mysterious purple halos appeared behind the martial Dao Prime Body with countless Dao and Dermic arts. 3 fate rings appeared. The aura of the martial Dao Prime Body surged and the power in his body rose rapidly. Under the envelopment of the 3 purple halos, the martial Dao Prime Body was like a true god that looked down on the world and was unparalleled. What is this? The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor murmured with a bewildered expression. This time round the voice did not sound. That was because even the voice did not understand what the 3 spinning purple halos behind the martial Dao Prime Body represented. The 3 fate rings appeared and the blood-colored threads on the palm of the martial Dao Prime Body were dispersed instantly. Battle. The martial Dao Prime Body hollered and carried the 3 fate rings. He moved his feet and Dao techniques interweaved, forming the image of a turtle snake. With a torrential aura, the martial Dao Prime Body stepped on the turtle snake and descended before the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, throwing out a punch. That punch was indestructible and could destroy everything. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor raised his arm as well and channeled his blood chi. The blood face mask released rumbling fiend chi that gathered on his arms to fight the martial Dao Prime Body head-on. Boom. There was a deafening bang. Both of them took a step back. The 2 of them were already in the void currents and their surroundings were dark and endless. However, the power released by that punch still caused Tianhuang mainland to tremble. Ah! The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor growled. Suddenly, the blood face mask released countless blood faces that surrounded the martial Dao Prime Body and bit wildly. The fate rings behind the martial Dao Prime Body spun slowly. The moment the blood faces charged forward, they were destroyed by the 3 fate rings. The 3 fate rings of the martial Dao Prime Body could even crush all Dermic treasures in the world. Boom, boom, boom. The 2 of them charged together once more and exchanged blows repeatedly. Their blood chi collided and their fists clashed, releasing a violent flurry of attacks. Up till this point of the battle, both of them had given it their all without holding back. Although the martial Dao Prime Body had the upper hand, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor had the help of the blood face mask and there were not many chances for the martial Dao Prime Body to suppress him. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor could not break free from the attacks of the martial Dao Prime Body either. The martial Dao Prime Body had the upper hand and released a suffocating attack. Like a storm, he suppressed everyone with his supreme strength and immense stamina. Do you have any ideas? The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor roared internally, "You're always bragging about your background. Can't you defeat this person from the lower world?" "My strength has yet to recover." A voice sounded in the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's mind. "Furthermore, there's a limit to my strength in the lower world. I wonder what Dermic formulation he cultivated that has already broken through that limit. Even if we don't kill him, he'll definitely die when he attempts tribulation transcendence in the future." The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor grit his teeth. I can't wait for him to undergo the Tribulation Transcendence anymore. I'm suppressed by him right now and can't even escape. What's the use of telling me about the Tribulation Transcendence? You're also trash. The voice sounded and sneered. I told you to refine Monk Daming a long time ago, but you refused to listen and allowed him to cultivate. Now he managed to dispel the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and left a huge flaw in your Fiend technique. If your Fiend technique was perfected, you wouldn't have had to worry about killing this person. Sensing the danger on the side of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, the attacks of the Astral Immortal Emperor became even more ferocious. After Buddha Dragon Elephant was dispelled, Monk Daming no longer had any trump cards. Under the attacks of the Astral Immortal Emperor, he was forced to retreat in defeat and his body was severely injured. Even with Monk Daming's regeneration capabilities, it would be difficult for him to recover within a short period of time. While the martial Dao Prime body was fighting the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, the Tao Wu Demon Emperor seized the opportunity to escape and charged in the direction of Monk Daming. He was prepared to join forces with the Astral Immortal Emperor to suppress Monk Daming as soon as possible. With that, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor could refine Monk Daming into his third clone and his Fiend technique would be perfected. He would definitely be able to turn defeat into victory. Monk Daming's face was pale as he retreated continuously. However, his gaze was still benevolent without any emotions in his eyes. Kill? The Astral Immortal Emperor strode forward and extended his gigantic palm, releasing an extremely ferocious power as though he wanted to pluck the stars in the firmaments. Supreme Divine Power, Star-Plucking Hand. The gigantic hand crushed down towards Monk Daming. It's time to end this. Monk Daming sighed gently and looked at the Astral Immortal Emperor not far away. Instead of retreating, he charged forward. Do you have a death wish? The Astral Immortal Emperor cursed. Naturally, he would not kill Monk Daming. All he had to do was lock the latter's essence spirit and release his secret skill to assimilate the latter completely. Monk Daming smiled gently and a destructive aura burst forth from his body. The aura was extremely berserk and almost drowned the Astral Immortal Emperor. The moment the Tao Wu Demon Emperor charged forward, he sensed that something was amiss. He was a demon after all and his spirit perception was different from ordinary people. Without thinking, he retreated. You. Suddenly, the eyes of the Astral Immortal Emperor widened as though he realized something. His eyes were filled with deep fear and his voice was trembling. Heavenly Fiend Dissolution. Monk Daming said. Boom. The moment he said that, Monk Daming's body exploded in front of the Astral Immortal Emperor, creating a terrifying storm that engulfed the latter instantly. At that moment, the world seemed to have stopped. Accompanied by that loud bang, even the battlefield of the Emperors was shaken violently. The Emperors turned and looked at everything in disbelief. Right in front of the Emperors, the Astral Immortal Emperor was torn apart by the destructive storm without a corpse or essence spirit left. Heavenly Fiend Dissolution. The storyteller was shocked. Heavenly Fiend Dissolution was a legendary supreme divine power. It was said that the person who released that supreme divine power would die right away. However, the moment his body disintegrated, it would release an extremely powerful storm that would destroy everything in its surrounding and devour all life. Nobody expected Monk Daming to comprehend that supreme divine power. Less than that, nobody expected Monk Daming to release Heavenly Fiend Dissolution without hesitation and die at the same time as the Astral Immortal Emperor. No. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor roared when he sensed what happened in Tianhuang mainland. The death of the Astral Immortal Emperor meant that one of his clones had vanished completely. More than that, it meant that an even greater flaw had appeared in his Fiend technique. Of course, what the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor truly could not accept was the death of Monk Daming. That was because the death of Monk Daming meant that he had lost completely in their fight. He no longer had a chance to turn the tides. Monk Daming was his eternal weakness. Chapter 1770 Benevolence of Monk Daming. Chapter 1770 Benevolence of Monk Daming. Monk Daming was dead. The impact was not only limited to taking away a clone of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. More than that, Monk Daming's choice caused an irreparable flaw in the Fiend Emperor Blood Refinement's Fiend technique that he would never be able to perfect in his lifetime. The fight between the two of them that lasted for 40,000 years finally came to a conclusion at this moment. Although Monk Daming died, he won the fight between the two of them. As though he was struck by lightning, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's aura decreased. Initially, because Su Zimo's two true bodies were not deeply fiendish, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor could only barely hold them back with the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. But now that Monk Daming and the Astral Immortal Emperor were both dead, the Fiend technique of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was severely injured. The auras of the two true bodies surged as they broke free from the restraints and influence of the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and woke up. The death of Monk Daming dealt a huge psychological blow to the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. In fact, a flaw even appeared in the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's Dao heart. Others might not be able to sense that slight change, but the martial Dao Prime body who was fighting the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor sensed it the most. It was as though the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor had aged significantly at that moment and had become dispirited. Su Zimo looked in the direction where Monk Daming died in silence. It was empty without anything left behind. The human Emperor's mirror, the Grand Primordium ancient temple and everything else had already turned into ashes. All traces of Monk Daming vanished without a trace in the heavenly fiend Dissolution. Scenes of his encounter with Monk Daming flashed through Su Zimo's mind as though it was yesterday. He had never understood Monk Daming. He could never tell what Monk Daming was thinking. Monk Daming cultivated the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and broke out of his coffin. His hands were stained with endless blood and he was no longer the compassionate monk of the past. However, Monk Daming still possessed the Buddhist nature. Otherwise, he would not have been able to cultivate the strongest supreme divine power of the Buddhist monasteries, the Buddha Dragon Elephant. Su Zimo did not know if Monk Daming was a Buddha or a fiend. It was only at this moment that he truly understood Monk Daming. The moment Monk Daming broke out of the coffin, he had no intention of living. His only goal in life was to dispel the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and defeat Blood Fiend. He had succeeded. Therefore, the reason why Monk Daming shaved his long hair and regained his usual appearance in this battle was also because he was prepared to die. Heavenly Fiend Dissolution was a supreme divine power of the Fiend sections. However, Monk Daming released it with the benevolence of the Buddhist monasteries. The storyteller and all the emperors looked in the direction where Monk Daming disappeared. Apart from shock, there was only respect in their eyes. 1,000 years ago, when the eternal human emperor descended, he clearly saw that Monk Daming cultivated a fiend technique. However, he still handed the human emperor's mirror to Monk Daming. Perhaps, it was because the eternal human emperor could also sense the benevolence in the depths of Monk Daming's heart. Roar! Ah! The Dragon Phoenix True Body and Green Lotus True Body roared into the skies with surging blood chi. The Dragon Phoenix True Body reverted to his true form and burned with the Dragon Phoenix flames as he charged towards the Tao Wu Demon Emperor. The Green Lotus True Body released 3 heads 6 arms as well. Wielding many dermic treasures, he charged and suppressed the Tao Wu Demon Emperor. The two true bodies joined forces and fought against the Tao Wu Demon Emperor. Boom, boom, boom. The moment they made contact, an earth-shaking collision broke out. Under normal circumstances, the Tao Wu Demon Emperor's combat strength was above Su Zimo's two true bodies. However, in the battle earlier on, the Tao Wu Demon Emperor was severely injured by the martial Dao Prime body and had expended a lot of energy, decreasing his combat strength. To a certain degree, the death of the Astral Immortal Emperor had an impact on him as well. Now that he was surrounded by Su Zimo's two true bodies, he was instantly disadvantaged and retreated repeatedly, his injuries worsening. On the other side in the void. Gather yourself. Don't die here. The voice in the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's mind sounded once more in a hurried manner as he hollered, I've helped you for 40,000 years and you're about to ascend through the tribulation transcendence. I don't want you to die here. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was silent and did not reply. The attacks of the martial Dao Prime body became increasingly ferocious. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was forced back in defeat and his fists were mangled as he coughed out blood continuously. Right now, the reason why he could still hold on was because the blood face mask was releasing fiend chi continuously. Hurry and escape, did you hear that? He won't be able to catch up to you if you release blood escape. With the help of your fiend technique, you'll definitely be able to make a comeback one day. The voice in the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's mind continued to sound with increasing anxiety. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor still did not reply. The Martial Dao Prime Body punched through the defense of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor and suddenly reached out to grab his face. "Let's see what you are." The gaze of the Martial Dao Prime Body intensified as he hollered softly. The blood face mask seemed to be sentient. Sensing danger, it suddenly emanated rumbling fiend chi and condensed into a sword that stabbed towards the palm of the Martial Dao Prime Body. Poof! The Martial Dao Prime Body gripped tightly and crushed the fiend chi sword. The Martial Dao Prime Body strode forward and continued grabbing the blood face mask. As long as he removed the blood face mask, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor would no longer be a threat. Swoosh! When it saw that it could not dodge, the blood face mask fell from the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's face on its own and transformed into a blood beam that sped into the distance. "Where can you run to?" The arm of the Martial Dao Prime Body suddenly expanded and his blood chi surged. His palm extended and swelled continuously, almost covering the skies. Piak! The Martial Dao Prime Body slapped the blood face mask and dispersed much of the fiend chi on it. A single punch from the Martial Dao Prime Body possessed shocking power that could destroy all dermic treasures instantly. However, that palm strike could not injure the blood face mask at all. The Martial Dao Prime Body closed his fingers, wanting to capture the blood face mask and refine it in the future. However, the moment he grabbed the blood face mask, he felt a sharp pain in his palm. Poof! A flash of blood appeared. The blood face mask broke free from the palm of the Martial Dao Prime Body. Not only that, the blood face mask even cut a few wounds on the palm of the Martial Dao Prime Body and fresh blood flowed. Even the dermic treasure of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor could not injure the body of the Martial Dao Prime Body. However, the blood face mask managed to cut the palm of the Martial Dao Prime Body. Not only that, the fiend chi released by the blood face mask tainted the wound on the palm of the Martial Dao Prime Body. The flesh around the wound turned greenish-black and was difficult to heal. The Martial Dao Prime Body was secretly alarmed. Right then, Su Zimo's glabella shone and a gigantic tripod that was 10 feet tall flew out. It had 4 legs, 2 handles and was filled with cracks, emanating an ancient aura. The bronze square tripod transformed into a streak of light and suppressed the blood face mask. Ah! Suddenly, a hurried shriek sounded from the blood face mask, filled with fear. This tripod. Chapter 1771 End. Chapter 1771 End. Although the origin of the blood face mask was unknown, there was a high chance it came from the upper world. Even the full-powered attack of the Martial Dao Prime Body could not suppress it. Even if Su Zimo summoned other dermic treasures, it would be useless. Although the bronze square tripod was filled with cracks and looked completely crippled, it was indestructible ever since Su Zimo obtained it. Even against all the top dermic treasures of Tianhuang mainland, the bronze square tripod was not damaged. Su Zimo did not think too much about it when he summoned the bronze square tripod. He merely thought that he might be able to use the bronze square tripod to restrain the blood face mask and let the Martial Dao Prime Body think of a way to suppress it. To think that there would be a living being hidden in the blood face mask. Its reaction was extremely intense, as though it knew the bronze square tripod. If the blood face mask came from the upper world, the bronze square tripod must have come from the upper world as well. Furthermore, the blood face mask seemed to be extremely fearful of the bronze square tripod. Boom. The bronze square tripod descended and smashed onto the blood face mask. Ah! A tragic cry sounded from the blood face mask. The rumbling fiend chi around the blood face mask was shattered by that attack and the blood on the mask splattered everywhere. The blood water rapidly formed a drop of blood in midair that emitted an evil aura, wanting to attach itself to the mask once more. At that moment, the Martial Dao Prime Body decisively abandoned the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor and descended. He raised the bronze square tripod and suppressed once more. Boom. Another loud bang sounded. The drop of blood was shattered by the bronze square tripod once more. Even if the drop of blood condensed once more, the blood light would dim significantly. The Martial Dao Prime Body reached out and held the remaining drop of blood in his palm. With a single thought, the Martial Dao Prime Body gathered his fingers and an impenetrable prison was formed in his palm. Although the drop of blood was dim, it was still extremely violent and was shrouded by fiend chi. From time to time, the drop of blood would transform into a strange and menacing blood face. At other times, it would condense into a lifeless tombstone that rampaged in the palm of the Martial Dao Prime Body, wanting to break free. Umph. The martial Dao Prime Body sneered and conjured the martial Spirit Fire and Red Lotus Karmic Fire in his palm. The two flames burned at the same time. The drop of blood let out a tragic cry in extreme pain. Even so, the two flames could not refine it completely. He did not know the origin of that drop of blood, let alone whose blood it was. Although it was only a single drop and even fell to the lower world, it could still defend against the power of the martial Spirit Fire and the Red Lotus Karmic Fire. The battle was not over yet. The martial Dao Prime Body put away the prison and let the martial Spirit Fire and Red Lotus Karmic Fire burn and refine that drop of blood continuously. The two balls of flames could not refine it. However, it was also extremely difficult for that drop of blood to break free from the prison conjured by the martial Dao Prime Body. The martial Dao Prime Body picked up the mask floating in midair. Without the taint of the blood light, the mask returned to its original appearance. It was silver white and made of an unknown material that was slightly cold to the touch. The martial Dao Prime Body squeezed with his palm, wanting to crush it and throw it away. However, the silver mask was intact. That attack from the martial Dao Prime Body could crush even dermic treasures into scrap metal. To think that he could not crush a mask that was as thin as cicada wings. The silver mask was clearly extraordinary. The martial Dao Prime Body put away the silver mask as well and threw the bronze square tripod back to the green Lotus true body. In a flash, he arrived before the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. Without the blood face mask, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's aura and strength decreased significantly. The injuries he accumulated in the battle against the martial Dao Prime Body were completely released within a short period of time and he aged considerably. On another battlefield. Against the encirclement of the two true bodies, the Tao Wu Demon Emperor was already at the end of the road. The Dragon Phoenix true body extended his menacing sharp claws and lunged forward to fight the Tao Wu Demon Emperor in close combat. He bit wildly and released his innate divine powers repeatedly. The world shook and the void on the battlefield was filled with cracks. The Dragon Phoenix true body restrained the Tao Wu Demon Emperor tightly. Su Zimo received the bronze square tripod that the martial Dao Prime Body threw back and raised it. Leaping up, he smashed it towards the head of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor. Bang! The Tao Wu Demon Emperor could not dodge thanks to the entanglement of the Dragon Phoenix true body. He could only turn his head slightly and avoid fatal damage. The bronze square tripod smashed heavily on his shoulder. Accompanied by the sound of bones cracking, the shoulder of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor was smashed into pieces by the bronze square tripod. Roar! He let out a pained roar. Half of his body was almost crushed by the bronze square tripod. The Dragon Phoenix true body took advantage of the situation and snapped the head of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor with a single bite. Fresh blood splattered everywhere. The moment the Tao Wu Demon Emperor's essence spirit escaped, a shadow enveloped it. The bronze square tripod descended once more. Bang! The essence spirit of the Tao Wu Demon Emperor was destroyed on the spot by the bronze square tripod. The second clone of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was dead as well. After the death of two clones as well as the loss of the blood face mask, the combat strength of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was greatly reduced. Blood Fiend, prepare to die. The gaze of the martial Dao Prime Body intensified and his attacks became increasingly ferocious. He threw punch after punch without giving the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor any chance to catch his breath. Bang! Finally. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor could not withstand it and his defense was broken by a single punch from the martial Dao Prime Body, striking his chest heavily. That punch almost severed the life force in the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's body. The blood chi of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor began to deteriorate rapidly and his life force drained. The current Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor no longer had his initial glory. His body was dilapidated and his hair was disheveled. He was covered in injuries and was at the end of his road. Fu. Suddenly, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor laughed and murmured, "To think that I would still lose to you in the end." Ah! It was clear that the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was not referring to Su Zimo. The laughter gradually stopped and the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor suddenly raised his head. He glared at the martial Dao Prime Body fiercely and grit his teeth. "Desolate Marshal, if not for Monk Daming, you wouldn't have been able to defeat me." The martial Dao Prime Body was silent. If Monk Daming had not sacrificed himself and destroyed one of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's clones, The outcome of this battle would indeed be unpredictable. That's good too. Suddenly the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor smiled. Since you made the move first to die before me, I'll follow you to the netherworld to take a look as well. We'll fight again in hell. When he realized that the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was about to commit suicide, the martial Dao Prime Body arrived before the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor in a flash and captured his essence spirit. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor still had many secrets. Who was the one who created the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra? What was the cloning technique cultivated by the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor? What was the origin of that blood face mask? The martial Dao Prime Body wanted an answer to those secrets. Chapter 1772 Three Corpses Technique. Chapter 1772 Three Corpses Technique. The vast spirit consciousness of the martial Dao Prime Body descended and sealed the space around the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. He reached out and slapped the latter on the head. A blood-colored essence spirit was captured by the martial Dao Prime Body from the head of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. What are you doing? The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor growled. Actually, he had already sensed what was about to happen. Without hesitation, a ball of light appeared in the palm of the martial Dao Prime Body. Black chains appeared on the ball of light and coiled around the essence spirit of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. Up till this point of the battle, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's essence spirit was weak and he lost 2 clones in succession. The death of Monk Daming even affected his Dao heart. This was the best time to use the soul-searching art on the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. All sorts of memories surged into the mind of the martial Dao Prime Body instantly and flashed before his eyes like paintings. The strange thing was that the memories of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor when he was young were a little blurry and were hidden in the depths, as though they were the parts that the latter was most unwilling to touch and could not be seen clearly. The martial Dao Prime Body did not waste time on this and looked further. By the time everything became clear, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was already a teenager. However, his cultivation was already at the Void Reversion realm. It was clear how terrifying his talent was. The first thing the martial Dao Prime Body saw was the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor fighting a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord. The Dharma characteristic Dao Lord was a middle-aged man with dark red hair that fell casually. He had handsome features and purple eyes that seemed to emit a demonic aura. However, no matter how handsome he was, he looked menacing as he glared at the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor not far away with a furious expression. The martial Dao Prime Body could clearly see that the saber in the hands of the Dharma characteristic Dao Lord was the Azura saber. This was the titular disciple of Azura sect at that time. Although the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was a remnant of the Bloodvine race, there was a major cultivation realm difference between them. Furthermore, he was facing the titular disciple of Azura sect and was severely injured, losing his combat strength and falling to the ground. At that moment, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor did not look as terrifying as he did in the future. His face was a little inexperienced as he bit his lip and glared at the Dao Lord of Azura sect in silence. "Little beast, how dare you attack me?" The Dao Lord of Azura sect hollered. "You deserve to die." The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor shouted. The Dao Lord of Azura sect did not say anything and merely looked at the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor coldly with a dark expression. A moment later, the Dao Lord of Azura sect wielded the Azura saber and walked towards the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor with a dark gaze filled with killing intent. Those that are not of our race will definitely harbor evil intentions. Indeed, I can't let you live. As he said that, the Dao Lord of Azura sect had already arrived before the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. He raised his Azura saber and was about to slash down. Right then the world shook. The martial Dao Prime Body focused his gaze. 2 items fell from the firmaments. One of them was the bronze square tripod. The other was the blood face mask. The bronze square tripod fell towards the north region of Tianhuang mainland. As though it sensed something, the blood face mask flew towards the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor and arrived instantly. Clang. The Dao Lord of Azura sect's saber did not manage to slice the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's head into 2. Instead, it bounced off the blood face mask. The person shuddered and the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor suddenly rose from the ground with his blood face mask. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor released a terrifying power and raised the broken saber in his hands, piercing it into the glabella of the Dao Lord of Azura sect. It was a fatal slash that killed the titular disciple of Azura sect right away. The entire process happened in a flash. Even when the titular disciple died, he could not understand how the blood refinement fiend emperor who had lost his combat strength could suddenly kill him. When the martial Dao prime body saw that, he was finally certain of something. The bronze square tripod and blood face mask came from the upper world and descended at the same time 40,000 years ago. The blood refinement fiend emperor looked at the corpse of the titular disciple of Azura sect with a conflicted expression. He stood there for a long time before taking a deep breath and turning to leave. The martial Dao prime body continued browsing through the memories of the blood refinement fiend emperor. Through those memories, the martial Dao prime body resolved many of his doubts. The Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra was indeed created by the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor with the secret skill of the Blood Vine race as the foundation. However, it was with the help of the living being in the Blood Face Mask. The living being in the Blood Face Mask had given the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor a lot of help in the latter's cultivation. Later on, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was hunted by the Immortal, Buddhist and Fiend Daos and no one helped him. If not for the Blood Face Mask he would have died a long time ago. Through the memories of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, the martial Dao prime body saw the monk Daming of the past as well. The two of them were mortal enemies. However, in the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's heart, monk Daming was his only confidant. That was because among all the cultivators, monk Daming was the only one who was willing to give him a chance. In the final battle, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor seized the opportunity to fake his death and escape under the suggestion of the Blood Face Mask to cultivate another fiend technique. This was the cloning technique imparted to the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor by the Blood Face Mask, the Three Corpses technique. Su Zimo had also heard Night Spirit mention this cloning technique before. It was said that it was ranked alongside the three pures of the immortal sects and the three bodies of the Buddhist monasteries. However, the martial Dao prime body could not find the background of the Blood Face Mask even after reading the memories of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor. The living being in the Blood Face Mask had never mentioned it either. Initially, the martial Dao prime body wanted to kill the essence spirit of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor directly. However, he hesitated for a moment and suddenly became curious about the blurry memories of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor when he was young. The martial Dao prime body returned once more and peeled back the threads. The memories were revealed bit by bit. After the scenes flashed before his eyes, the expression of the martial Dao prime body gradually turned complicated. "Bastard! How dare you disobey my orders?" A tender face was trampled viciously by a Bloodvine clansman into the mud and crushed continuously. The Bloodvine clansman looked down and stepped on the young man's cheek, saying coldly, "You're a bastard and your mother is a slut. Don't scold my mother." Although the young man was trampled beneath and his face was buried in the ground with his mouth filled with mud, he grit his teeth and said with a furious expression, "Foo-foo." The Bloodvine clansman sneered, "Your mother seduced random men outside and gave birth to you. You guys are the shame of the Bloodvine race." As he cursed, the Bloodvine clansman pushed the young man's face into the mud. A group of Bloodvine clansmen stood around and mocked brazenly as they watched the show. The martial Dao prime body suddenly understood why the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor killed the entire Bloodvine race without exception. When the martial Dao prime body saw those memories, the essence spirit of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor suddenly became agitated and wanted to break free from the restraints of the martial Dao prime body. Those were the secrets in the depths of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's heart. Given the pride of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, he would definitely not mention such an experience to anyone. Chapter 1773, End of an Era. Chapter 1773, End of an Era. The martial Dao prime body continued browsing through the memories of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor and witnessed everything. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was bullied in the Bloodvine race and any Bloodvine clansman could punch, kick and shout at him. Under such circumstances, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor grew bit by bit. There was only a single reason why he did not leave. His mother was imprisoned in the Bloodvine race. Later on, the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor watched helplessly as his mother was forced to her death by the Bloodvine clansman while he was helpless. Before her death, Blood Fiend's mother was worried that her child would continue to be bullied in the clan. Therefore she asked Blood Fiend to leave the Bloodvine race and look for her father. Blood Fiend escaped from the Bloodvine race and vanished silently. Nobody in the Bloodvine race cared about his life or death, nor did anyone look for him. Blood Fiend arrived at Azura sect in Tianhuang mainland according to the information left behind by his mother. At that point, the martial Dao Prime body's heart skipped a beat as he recalled the initial scene and a terrifying possibility. After Blood Fiend joined Azura sect and cultivated diligently, he finally found an opportunity to meet that person. The titular disciple of Azura sect. The first person that the martial Dao Prime body saw Blood Fiend kill was his father. There was no warm scene when the father and son met. Instead, an intense argument broke out. At that time, the Azura had almost forgotten that he was once on good terms with a woman of the Bloodvine race and was indifferent towards the existence of Blood Fiend. Your mother was only one of my women. The Azura of that generation said indifferently, I was merely playing around with her. She can't be considered as my Dao companion at all, everything was just for fun. Furthermore, after such a long time, who knew what other men she was having affairs with before you were born? Unable to hold it in any longer, Blood Fiend attacked the Azura of that generation, causing a huge battle to break out. After that was the scene that the martial Dao Prime body first saw. Blood Fiend was bullied when he was young and his heart was already twisted after losing his mother and father. Later on, he was hunted down by countless cultivators and was born as the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor who caused multiple catastrophes in the future. Suddenly, the essence spirit of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor released an extremely intense resistance. Those memories were the last thing he wanted to face and recall. Given the pride of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, he was definitely not willing to let a second person know about those secrets. Crack, crack, crack. In the ball of light, cracks appeared on the pitch-black chains that coiled around the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor's essence spirit. They were about to be broken. Nobody can kill me, not even you, desolate marshal. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor suddenly broke free from the chains and growled with a menacing and pained expression. Boom. The essence spirit of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor self-destructed and shattered, turning into nothingness in the palm of the martial Dao Prime body. Actually, as long as the martial Dao Prime body closed his palm and channeled his spirit consciousness to suppress the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor once more, he could control the latter. In fact, he could even kill the essence spirit of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor with ease. However, the martial Dao Prime body did not bother. After reading those memories, he chose to give the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor a chance to commit suicide and leave him with some dignity. The Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor died without a trace. His corpse turned into blood that splashed onto Tianhuang mainland as well. Blood Fiend had never experienced any parental love, kinship or friendship. In the past he was only bullied, humiliated, unjustly mocked and hunted. It was because of those experiences that the cruel and merciless Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor was born later on. The reason why Monk Daming was willing to give the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor a chance might be because he knew about the latter's past. Su Zimo looked at the void in silence with a conflicted expression and lamented internally. Although they were both remnants of the primordial races and were abandoned, Blood Fiend and Monk Daming walked two completely different paths. Both of them were peerless geniuses. Blood Fiend created the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and orchestrated multiple catastrophes in secret. In a certain sense, everything for the past 40,000 years had been under the rule of Blood Fiend. The primordial races were no exception. Every single living being in Tianhuang mainland was merely his chess piece. The ambitions of Blood Fiend were truly terrifying. He wanted to assimilate all the living beings of Tianhuang mainland into a race. If not for Dai Yu's appearance, Blood Fiend would have succeeded more than 1,000 years ago and no one would have been able to stop him. Monk Daming was even more admirable. He endured 40,000 years in that ancient coffin alone. The suffering he endured for the past 40,000 years was unimaginable. In the end, Monk Daming chose to turn into a fiend and break out of his coffin. Later on, he found a way to dispel the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and break free from the shackles of Blood Fiend. Actually, the fight between the two of them had lasted for 40,000 years and only just ended. With the death of the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor, the remaining emperors were nothing to worry about. Before long, all of them died under the attack of the martial Dao Prime body. The storyteller came to Su Zimo's side and stood shoulder to shoulder with him. He looked at the damaged battlefield and sighed softly. It's finally over. Martial Emperor, I once said that the ancient era belonged to the human emperor. This era belongs to you. No. Su Zimo shook his head. Why? The storyteller said, you established the martial Dao and imparted martial arts to all living beings, uncovered the truth of the primordial era and suppressed the emperors of the primordial races so that the 10,000 races can coexist. Now you've resolved the blood fiend catastrophe that lasted for 40,000 years. Such merits will naturally be left in the history books for everyone to admire. Su Zimo shook his head gently. This is not my era alone. In this era there's Night Spirit, Lin Xuanji, the dragon race, the emperors of the human race, and you, senior. It's because of you guys that such a magnificent era was created. The storyteller smiled. No matter what, your contributions in this generation are unparalleled. Su Zimo sighed. No matter how great my contributions are, they can't outshine Monk Daming's brilliance. The storyteller was silent. If this generation was mentioned in the future, the first people to be mentioned would be the Martial Emperor, Monk Daming and Blood Fiend. In the ancient era, the human emperor reigned supreme alone. However, in this generation, the Martial Emperor, Monk Daming and Blood Fiend left indelible marks and shone with their own brilliance. Is there truly reincarnation in this world? Suddenly Su Zimo asked. The storyteller said, reincarnation only exists in the legends. A power like that will probably only exist in the upper world, I guess. Su Zimo whispered, if there's reincarnation, I hope that Monk Daming can still be a human in his next life and obtain better karma. The deaths of Monk Daming and the Blood Refinement Fiend Emperor also meant the end of an era. Su Zimo would not stay in Tianhuang mainland for long either, as he would attempt Tribulation Transcendence to ascend soon. In the future, Tianhuang mainland would welcome a brand new era where the martial Dao flourished and the 10,000 races coexisted. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.